One spokesman in Israel has accused you of cooperating with a terrorist organization that calls for the destruction of the State of Israel. Many Israelis noted that very soon after that October 7 attack, your foreign minister reached out by phone to have a conversation with Ismail Haniyeh, one of the leaders of Hamas, and that was even before your president, Cyril Ramaphosa, had found himself able to make a public condemnation of what Hamas had done on October 7. In Israel, you look like Hamas sympathizers.
That was also an argument they presented to court, and the court has found it to be irrelevant to the matter at stake. And we have been very clear. We are not friends of Hamas. Our bilateral relations are with the state of Palestine. There's no confusion about this. They are just using such kind of words or conspiracies to blackmail us not to take action to protect the fundamental human rights of the children, the women of Palestine. And we have got an international obligation standing on the Genocide Conventions on the shoulders of our former and founding president Nelson Mandela, who participated in ensuring that we are part of the signatories of the Genocide Convention, and also our former Minister of Justice, who domesticated the Genocide Convention in South Africa to ensure that no one in the world or any vulnerable people suffer when we can be able to invoke the contents and bring to life the Genocide Convention.
Does it worry you?
Minister,
you're the Minister of Justice. I just want to move on to what's happening inside South Africa in reaction to this case and your enthusiasm to bring this case at The Hague, what impact it's had inside your own country. Many Jewish South Africans, a community of long-standing in your country, some tens of thousands of South African Jews, many of them say right now they feel deeply uncomfortable. I'm going to quote to you Howard Sackstein, one of the community's leading voices, who wrote recently, "I sit here staring at my suitcase, contemplating whether it's time to leave the only home I've ever known. For Jews, this country no longer feels like a safe space or home. The government's been captured by radical Islamists and their sympathizers." How do you react to that?
It's a very unfortunate statement, not backed by any facts, just his own figment of his own imagination. As you will have seen in the court papers, we argued that our case is not against the Jewish as a people. It's against the Zionist state of Israel, against the military operations that they are running of maiming and killing the Palestinians as a group in Gaza. And in South Africa, there is no threat, harm, or whatsoever to the Jewish people. They continue to participate in all forms of social life. As you speak to me now, nothing has happened to him, and nothing will happen to him or any Jewish community on the basis of their creed, sex, or religion.
But I mean, you're Justice Minister, so you know much better than me that there's been a rise in anti-Semitic attacks in South Africa since October 7. I mean, the statistics tell us that.
No, there's no such. As I'm speaking to you today, the president wrote in his weekly newsletter, which he also stated very clear, that our action is not on the basis of anti-Semitism. It's on the basis of our obligation as a nation believing in human rights to stand for the vulnerable children of Palestine. So there is no anti-Semitism in South Africa against the Jewish people, but it's this court case and our actions in support of the people in Gaza is in line with the Genocide Convention, is in line with our duty to protect the vulnerable in that space.
There's a wider accusation to be put to South Africa right now in the light of the stand you've taken at the International Court of Justice, and that is an accusation of a basic double standard and hypocrisy. You're telling the world that the ICJ rulings, even their provisional measures, must be adhered to, must be respected when it comes to this genocide case in Israel. But you didn't take that stand, did you, when the International Court of Justice ruled against Russia in March 2022 and demanded an immediate withdrawal of all Russian forces from the territories in Ukraine that they had invaded? South Africa, ever since then, has been neutral and extremely amicable toward Vladimir Putin. Why the double standard?
We have never been neutral. We have been very clear that there must be a ceasefire. There must be a peaceful solution to the situation in the Ukraine and Russia. And you will remember that our president led an African initiative to engage both the president of Russia and the president of Ukraine to open for an engagement and allow for a humanitarian ceasefire, including the return of the children.
Yeah, see, I come back to the point of hypocrisy, and some places where you really, really want to stand for what you call international justice and multilateralism, and other places where you don't seem to be so bothered. You are friends with Vladimir Putin. Your military has conducted military exercises with Russian forces since the all-out invasion of Ukraine, but also we could look at China, where the ANC has constantly looked the other way despite allegations from the United Nations and from human rights groups of systemic abuse against the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang province. And only the other day, a senior ANC official talked about the big positive progress being made by the Chinese government in Xinjiang. Again, double standards. You're ready to look the other way when it comes to your friends.
That is not correct. We have stand very firmly in all multilateral institutions in support of human rights. We have also, with regards to the military operations and training, we have also done so with the United States of America. We have done so with France. We have done so with many countries in the West. So this is a normal drilling or military training that happens. So we do it with all countries of the world because that is a platform for exchange of modern technology, modern military operations. So we also do it with the UK. We do it with the United States of America. We do it with all countries of the world in line with the military conventions.
Minister, there's politics here, isn't there? South Africa's in an election year. There's going to be an election sometime after the month of May. The ANC record is very poor. The opinion polls haven't looked good to you for months. You've got endemic poverty, you've had power outages, you've had systemic unemployment for many years, you've got service failure on many levels, and now you've got an issue where you can turn to the South African people and say, vote for us because we've got this international profile that we haven't had for years. Is this part of the ANC's election campaign?
It is not because there are elections, it's because there was an escalation. And we have been campaigning on this matter for many, many, many years.
I have to say right now, thank you for being on Hard Talk. Thanks for joining me from Johannesburg.
Thank you very much.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Jeff Goods. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and you're listening on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or you're seeing us on YouTube. Thanks for joining us for the show today. It's Friday, end of a mild week in Winnipeg. Very icy out there, crunchy in the back lanes. Call us if you need, 788-3093. We're on air with you with the morning show till 8:37 AM. Let's say good morning to the team. In early, our community reporter, Shanley Vidal. She's going to be out on site today because don't you know, it's Groundhog Day, February 2nd, so we'll hear more about that. Also, good morning to Travis Peterson behind our YouTube controls, Corey Funk, who directs the show and will be covering the commute, and Mr. Abby Adeyemi, who is our technical producer on InfoRad and will be covering our weather forecast. Speaking of which, in Winnipeg today, we will look for another mild high, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Let's go to Heather Wells, who has our news.
Good morning. Well, the man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million in meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. Kumalpreet Sidhu appeared in Brandon courtroom yesterday. Among bail conditions, he has to pay $140,000 in cash and securities and has to wear a GPS tracker and adhere to a curfew. And for the second time in less than a month, the Winnipegger is going to be rubbing elbows with some of the biggest stars in showbiz. Amanda Boosie will be a seat filler at Sunday's Grammy Awards. She knows what to do. She was also a seat filler at the Emmy Awards just last month. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
So much fun, right?
No kidding.
I'd be the worst. I'd be like, I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I spilled my drink on, I don't know, someone famous. I love that story. Okay, let's get into the forecast here. Thank you, Heather. A high today of 2 degrees. Right now it is -3. And I should just mention here before we get going, there's a fog advisory. This will affect areas around Portage, Morden, Brandon, Killarney, Verdon, Dauphin, Minnedosa, extending through Swan River as well. So this is serious stuff near zero visibility. So take it easy out there and have a safe commute. Well, speaking of the Grammys, in the first hour of the show, music legend Joni Mitchell has never performed at the Grammys, but she will this weekend. We're going to get some analysis of that, play some music, and celebrate her influential career. Richard Fry is our guest, actually, this morning from CBC. In addition, how safe is your data on the internet? A few weeks ago, we talked passwords. This week, we have another follow. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The Irish singer Bob Geldof is the guy behind the charity single Do They Know It's Christmas and the massive concert Live Aid for famine relief in 1985. Bob will look back on his charity shows and he'll tell you why life after Live Aid wasn't an easy adjustment.
And I needed to pause to take this in, the enormity of this thing.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm John Northcott. We begin with the Canadian Air Force's maritime helicopters and a fleet of cyclones plagued with problems. We told you how 2 decades after the helicopters were ordered, some still have not been delivered, how the cost of owning and operating them has ballooned by another $1 billion, and how concerning cracks have been reported in the tails of some helicopters. Now, the CBC's Murray Brewster has a report that shows a defect in the cyclone's main rotor blades is forcing technicians to perform more inspections.
After looking at a copy of an internal airworthiness document, this is the reaction from Defence Minister Bill Blair.
I think my first priority is making sure that the men and women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces can do their job safely, and that the equipment that we send them out to do the important job that they do is fit for purpose.
CBC News obtained a copy of the Air Force Risk Management Report. It shows the U.S. manufacturer Sikorsky warned Canada in June 2022 about a potential issue with some of the Cyclone's main rotor blades, defects that could cause the blades to come apart in flight. Subsequent testing has discovered 4 defective blades. More testing is being done on 7 others. None of the Cyclone blades have failed in flight. Blair says the Defense Department has a plan and is confident in the Cyclones.
I rely on the advice we receive from D&D and from CAV, the people that operate them and also those who are responsible for their maintenance and procurement.
In the meantime, the Cyclone blades will have to be inspected every 50 hours. Jeremiah Gertler, a U.S. military aviation analyst, says it's a disruption.
They should be concerned about this because with the more frequent inspections, it's possible that they'll be able to use the Cyclones less. They'll spend less time in the air and more time getting checked out.
The defective blades are being returned to the manufacturer. It is, however, part of a growing list of concerns about the Cyclone, including cracked tail rotors and a combat system that the Air Force is scrambling to replace. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, is in Ukraine.
Canada is a proud friend of Ukraine, and we have stood firm with Ukrainians as they're fighting for their freedom.
Joly met with her Ukrainian counterpart this morning. The statement says they were negotiating a Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement and discussing long-term security commitments. Joly will also take part in efforts to address the unlawful transportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. This is her 4th trip to Ukraine since the beginning of 2022. Senior Palestinian officials say the U.S. isn't doing enough to punish violent Israeli settlers. Some human rights groups have been calling attention to a surge in violence in the occupied West Bank. They characterize the sometimes fatal attacks on Palestinian civilians as revenge killings. The CBC's Chris Brown reports.
Just as the U.S. president was announcing new sanctions against Israeli settlers, CBC News was sitting down for an interview with Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh.
It's not enough. What we need to see from United States is really put sanctions on settlement products, not to allow Israel to continue with this colonization program.
He means not to buy or trade goods and services produced by settlers on occupied Palestinian land. The U.S. sanctions named 4 individuals accused of leading rampages against Palestinian businesses, attacking farmers, and trying to drive civilians out of their communities. They and others targeted by the U.S. measures will have their financial assets frozen, along with other penalties.
The settlement is a total destruction of two-state solution, and settlement construction is an erosion of the future Palestinian state.
Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the sanctions. He says Israel acts against all violators of the law and the U.S. measures are unnecessary. Canada's government has not announced any measures against violent settlers. Since October the 7th, almost 27,000 people in Gaza have been killed by Israel's military campaign, as well as 372 Palestinians in the West Bank by settlers and the military. Qatari officials who are trying to broker a ceasefire have indicated Israel and Hamas are close to a deal, but obstacles remain. Chris Brown, CBC News, Ramallah.
Back in this country, police are investigating after shots were fired into the house of a BC Khalistan activist. It happened overnight, Thursday, in Surrey, BC. Maninder Singh is with the BC Gurdwaras Council. He identifies the owner of the home as Simranjit Singh.
Up to 20-plus shots fired into his home, including up to about 2 feet away from his 6-year-old that was sleeping upstairs and went right by his bed. It was quite a horrifying scene for him.
No injuries were reported. Singh says the owner of the home was a close friend of murdered Surrey Temple leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. RCMP says this was an isolated incident. The public inquiry into foreign interference is set to hear from its first ministerial witness in just a few hours. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc's testimony is important because this week's proceedings are focused on how much information the federal government will allow to be made public. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, we got a bit of a preview of the government's position yesterday.
Sure did. John, the mandate for this inquiry was to make as much information public as possible. But yesterday, we were shown a letter that government lawyers wrote to the Commission warning that beyond national security interests, there are also practical limits on what information can be cleared for release. We were shown an initial batch of 13 relatively short documents that apparently took 200 person hours to review and redact. We were cautioned that that is time away from the important work that intelligence officers otherwise need to be doing. At one point, the head of Canada's intelligence agency, CSIS, said that, well, you know what? Spying's not something you do in public.
So the purpose of CSIS is to have secrets, which is different than transparency.
David Vigneault there, managing expectations, sure. But as the day went on, a lawyer that was representing media organizations also asked the senior security officials to confirm that they wouldn't be protecting information simply to prevent embarrassment or conceal inefficiencies, errors, problems in their conduct. Final decisions on what's released often come down to the politicians of the day. So that's why this week of witnesses concludes with Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc.
Okay, Janice, as we watched that, before the hearing began, the Commission asked the government for documents related to foreign interference by India. Now, that's prompted more groups to ask for standing in this inquiry.
That's right. 3 prominent Canadian Sikh organizations announced yesterday they've written seeking standing when it gets to its factual phase in March. In their letter, they argue that part of their advocacy includes engaging their communities in the Canadian political process, but that has led to targeting by the government of India, with diaspora groups from Ukraine, for example, the Chinese minority communities already very active at the inquiry. The absence of Sikh representation, they say, would be unacceptable.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Ontario is expecting a ruling from the country's highest court today on a bid by Premier Doug Ford's government to keep its marching orders to cabinet ministers confidential. The Supreme Court of Canada will rule on a case sparked by the CBC's request under the province's Freedom of Information laws. They involve mandate letters written to ministers after Ford won the 2018 election. The request was denied by the government on the basis that releasing the documents would reveal the substance of cabinet deliberations. The Information and Privacy Commissioner disagreed, ordering the government to disclose them. 2 levels of Ontario courts have also sided with the CBC. Some athletes in Nunavut are worried they'll have to miss this year's Arctic Winter Games. Alaska is hosting the event in March, but with the Games only 5 weeks away, dozens of athletes still don't have passports. Nick Murray reports.
Nunavut has nearly 300 athletes ready to compete in Alaska in March, but a quarter of them might not make it.
Nunavut athletes who earned their spot.
Nunavut MP Lori Edelhout raised the issue in the House of Commons this week. She says part of the problem is Nunavut only has 3 Service Canada centres, none that process passport applications.
Families are now forced to pay thousands of dollars to fly down south to get their passports expedited or not compete at all.
Edelhout tells CBC News that her staff was helping athletes by having passport applications mailed to her office. Staff would then go line up at Service Canada to hand deliver it, but she says in November, Service Canada red flagged her office and barred her staff from bringing applications in person.
Another huge barrier from Service Canada is the correspondence are sent in English and French only, so there are many Inuit that don't read either of those languages.
If they can't go because they can't get a passport in time, that's very disappointing for them.
Marilla Deputer is Team Nunavut's chef de mission. She echoed the concerns over language barriers, saying some applications were sent back for minor errors.
Or they've had issues getting the photo ID or the birth certificates in the first place to even be able to apply.
In a statement, the Office for Citizen Services Minister Terry Beach says they're aware of the challenges and aim to process mail-in applications in 20 days. Nick Murray, CBC News, Iqaluit.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday. Thanks for joining us. February 2nd, Groundhog Day. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 or on YouTube. You might also be listening on the CBC Listen app this morning. No matter how you're joining us, thanks for making us part of your day. -3 in the city, and it is clear in Winnipeg right now. We will get into the forecast and more details in just a moment, as always. This hour on the show, we're also going to be talking about music. So coming up at 10 to 7, music legend Joni Mitchell has never performed at the Grammys until now. The singer-songwriter will take to the stage Sunday night. It's her first performance at the prestigious award show. We'll hear more about that and her influential career. In addition, this hour, just how safe is your data on the internet? We'll talk to a reporter who writes about tech after that recent huge data breach. We previously had talked about how to keep your passwords safe. But we begin here locally, talking about the Snowball Winter Festival coming up in West Broadway. So it's on this weekend, and we have the organizer on standby right now, who's going to talk to us in a moment about what they've had to shift, again, because of the weather. So many events having to make amendments. Right now, let's get to Heather Wells, who's in our news department with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg man who was taken to the Health Sciences Centre after a car crash 2 weeks ago says he left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas alleges he was beaten by hospital security guards. We're going to hear what happened and what Shared Health says about it all. Also, a bear cub that hobbled at least 16 kilometers on 3 legs from Ontario to Manitoba is now on the road to recovery. That cub was taken to Black Bear Rescue Manitoba. So we'll hear what happened to that little one as well in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
To the forecast now as promised with Abby Adeyemi. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. For folks in Winnipeg, as you're stepping out this morning, the current temperature is at -3 degrees under clear skies. It's going to be a brisk and crisp morning with clear skies. We see a mix of sun and cloud near noon. The high for today is expected to reach 2 degrees. Also in the forecast, we have a fog advisory in effect for various regions, including Melita, Boissevain, Port La Prairie, Morden, Winkler, Brandon, Dauphin, and Swan River. Near zero visibility is reported due to the dense fog in that part, in the part of the western Red River Valley and western Manitoba, and is expected to stay all morning, impacting travel with hazardous conditions. So for drivers, you should slow down, keep a safe distance, and be prepared to, stop that sudden reduction in visibility if it happens. Just be prepared for that and exercise caution on the road during this foggy period as it clears off. But right now, Winnipeg is currently at -3.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, how you doing?
Doing good. Yep.
My back lane was crunchy when I was driving driving through it. What's it like out there in the commute?
Yeah, crunchy underfoot a little bit as well this morning. The kind of the theme has kind of been slippery in the morning, slushy on the way home for me on my run. And that's no different this morning for folks. Been pretty quiet, though, on the road so far. It seems, as you just heard from Abby, look out for that fog out there, particularly if you're in the western part of the province. Seems to be pretty thick out there. So curious what people are seeing or not seeing. You can always give me an update out there. Also, it's Friday. Curious to see what people are seeing on the trails as well. Don't know what the ski trails are looking like in Birds Hill, for example, or anywhere else, if they're hacked up or somehow still if there's some glide there or not. Give me a call to give me an update on any of that stuff. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, there are a lot of things going on around town this weekend, and one of them is on for the 21st year. Despite the lack of snow and frigid temperatures, there's still plenty of winter fun happening on Saturday, tomorrow, the West Broadway neighborhood celebrating their Snowball Winter Festival. From horse-drawn carriage rides, which are back, to outdoor games and hot cocoa, there's going to be lots going on. It is free if you want to check it out. So we want to tell you more about where you can check that out and what else is happening. Kelly Fraser's up early to tell us about that, Executive Director of the West Broadway Community Organization. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So I'm right? The horse-drawn carriage ride, so you guys had to take a pause for a bit.
Yeah, they haven't been at the carnival since before the pandemic, so we're really excited to get that offering back. It's always been kind of a crowd favorite, and luckily we do go with wheels and not the sleigh, so we shouldn't have a problem despite the lack of snow.
No kidding. So the lack of snow has altered a few things, right? So tell us a bit about what won't be able to be happening this year. What's changed?
Yeah, so, we've always considered Snowball to be a festival where you take whatever Mother Nature gives you and make the best of it. So this year, what we've been given is above normal temperatures and not a lot of snow. So unfortunately, we're not going to have the snow hill or the snow sculptures, and it's not looking great for the ice rink, but there'll still be plenty for people to do in addition to the horse-drawn rides. There is Fit Kids, Healthy Kids will be there with the winter survival. We have 2 fire pits that people can sit and chat and enjoy. Art City is going to have a lot of great stuff going on. They have some cardboard forts that kids will love. They are doing their hot chocolate stand again. That was a really big hit last year. They had some really interesting toppings, including dill pickle and Dorito last year. So I'm interested to see what they come up with.
Did you try those?
This year? I didn't personally, but they did apparently get one order for the dill pickle and Dorito hot chocolate. So somebody out there tried it.
And they live to tell the tale. Maybe they'll be back.
I think so. We also have Arts Junction that will be joining us this year for the first time to do a craft with kids inside the Broadway Neighborhood Center facility. So that should be fun.
So is everything icy out? Can you pull off any skating on the community rink there or toboggan rides at all?
We're going to call it tomorrow morning, but I saw that the city has closed all the city facility rinks.
Yeah, they have.
If it's not safe, we definitely won't let people out on the ice.
21 years is a long time. Why do you think it's successful and people still come back and support it in West Broadway?
Well, it's a really beloved event here in West Broadway, I would say. Everybody looks forward to it. We have a strong community spirit here in West Broadway, and of course the fact that it's free is great, makes it accessible for all the community members. Of course, everybody likes to get out and see the West Broadway Yeti, too, who only makes a special appearance once a year. So
once a year. So
yeah.
Do we know what time the Yeti will appear, or like all Yetis, is that elusive?
Very elusive. The Yeti is always shrouded in mystery. The Yeti appears, meets with the people, and then goes back into hibernation for another year. But
sounds like Groundhog. It's a perfect story for today because it's Groundhog Day. They have the same kind of habits.
Yeah.
Where does this happen for people that have never been and maybe they want to come? Where physically is it happening?
It's at 185 Yonge Street. So that is Broadway Neighborhood Center, and there's activities inside the facility and out in the field.
Should people bring anything? Like, what should they be prepared for? You mentioned fire pits and such. Like, do you need to bring chairs, or what should you be mindful of?
No, we have a fire pit area with hay bales. One thing we do ask that people bring, if they can, is a reusable mug. We have the hot chocolate on offer, and to be environmentally friendly, it's great if people can bring their own mugs so we can cut down on those disposable cups.
I always like something that you do that we often follow after to hear more about what the story is. You do something that involves a golden shovel. What is that?
Yeah, so every year we have the Golden Shovel Award and the Golden Trowel Award. So those are awards to recognize volunteerism here in the community. So Golden Shovel is for an adult volunteer and Golden Trowel is for a youth volunteer.
Amazing.
Yeah, volunteers are a really important part of all our community programming. So we'd like to take every occasion we can to recognize those volunteers and their important work.
How are you guys doing in West Broadway overall to that end in terms of the spirit of community and volunteers supporting the programs that are so important and just keeping things going? We're in this real transitional year where people are building again.
Yeah, it's great to see people coming back out. Definitely was hard coming out of the pandemic. Everyone was a little tentative, but we're really seeing people, come back out and be there for the community now, and it's great.
Enjoy it, Kelly. I have noon to 4. Do I have my hours right?
Yes, noon to 4 is correct.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay, thanks so much, Marcy.
It's Kelly Fraser. She's the executive director of the West Broadway Community Organization. So the West Broadway Snowball Winter Festival, the 21st year, happening tomorrow, Saturday, at the Broadway Neighborhood Center. As I mentioned, it goes from noon to 4. It is free for everyone with the food and hot beverages. And if we just take a peek at tomorrow once again and remind you, it looks pretty good. Increasing cloud in the morning, some lighter wind, and a high of 2 degrees.
Nothing can stop an Iron Man from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
Hey, early morning listeners, why don't you win our prize pack? We've got 2 left here. We've got a really nice toque. No joke. Every time I wear this particular CBC toque, people always say, where can I get one? Well, right here. We've got a toque, we've got a shirt, we've got a bag, we've got a mug. It's all CBC winter swag, and you could win. So I think I'm looking at you, YouTubers. Are you up early? Are you watching on YouTube? Let's give one of these to a YouTuber. Yeah. So in the next hour, we'll pop that toque on. We'll show you what you're vying for. But right now, just put, I want the toque into the stream, into the comments if you're watching, and maybe you'll be our winner. 6:21. Always want to reward the people that are up early on a Friday morning. Next on the show, we have been talking about this. It was dubbed the mother of all breaches, or Moab for short. Security researchers say that 26 billion data records were leaked, including usernames and passwords from sites like LinkedIn and X, Adobe, and Dropbox. Not your typical data breach. We talked a bit about this last week as we discussed how to make your passwords safer. But right now, let's dig more deeply into what happened here, or what we understand may have happened here. Timur Durrani is here, national reporter with the Globe and Mail, who's written extensively on cybersecurity issues. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. And I'm going to be in Winnipeg soon, so this is nice that I get to say hi to you.
Oh, good. I'll have to ask you at the end what's bringing you here.
Yeah.
Let's start with this data breach. So what do we understand about the legitimacy of the report on the breach? Like, where's the information coming from, and why aren't we hearing more about it if it was so huge?
Yeah, so I think it's important to talk about it in the frame of skepticism as well, because right now everything that we do know about it is coming from the niche sort of, hyper sites and, blogs and things like that the cybersecurity researchers themselves sort of run, right? Not to take away from that, though, because a lot of the times, these big hacks, they do first start up, and become part of the broader knowledge, and mainstream media starts then looking into them based on the stuff that comes out on these blogs, for first, right? And historically, even mainstream media, including here at the Globe, like we have not necessarily always taken these things seriously, but these sites have always taken them seriously. And the cybersecurity researchers that see these things on the ground, and when they note these things, they have been taking this stuff seriously. What we do know, that skepticism aside, is that this is billion with a capital B, 26 billion records. So that's 12 terabytes of information. That's a lot of information that we're talking about here, a lot of records that we're talking about here. So it's really hard to verify, but it's usernames and passwords and things that are, that were breached before that are now being consolidated into it with some new breaches. So it's hard to verify which part is new, which part isn't, but it's including at least 20 different new brands and 20 different brands that we're talking about here. So that's things like LinkedIn, X, which used to be called Twitter. And then we're also talking about graphic sites, not just social media. We're talking about Canva and Adobe and things like that. And even we're talking about Venmo, which is much like a PayPal sort of system in the States, right? And so it's a lot of information out there, and supposedly all of that has been breached by these different hackers that have been working to consolidate that information together.
So hackers, do we have any more information about how it happened?
It fits into the broader pattern. I think that's important to frame it in that way. This is something we've seen over and over and over happen again and again and again. And I think that's probably why some people that are listening to this right now might sort of, understandably become complacent about these things. I mean, last year I've covered so many different one individual story after the other about a hack, right? Like, the Prime Minister's office got hacked, the Senate of Canada's website got hacked, our armed forces got hacked, and the hospitals around the country that have been hacked. But that's just the government, right? But then we're also talking about different businesses also that have been hacked, like the Weather Network, which operates our Amber Alert system. And, you name it, right? The Indigo story that is continuing to reverberate about hacking and these individual things. So that stuff is all fitting into this broader pattern of how the hackers in those cases were able to breach these different systems to obtain the personal information of the different customers, or sometimes even the workers within those companies or those organizations, to try to get that information. And ultimately, it's all about money. They want to loom that fear on top of you about what kind of information they have on you and what they can possibly do with that to get money out of you, whether that's on a corporate side, an individual sort of, or an individual side as well.
So we did a story. You might have heard me sing in the introduction before you came on. Like we did a whole look at passwords, and we talked about how people sort of do become complacent about their passwords, and how do you make a strong password, and what do you do if you have to reset everything? What's your advice if you think if to people, if they're listening and someone's worried that in this breach their information was compromised, or it's prompting them, even if they don't feel they're affected, to try to really do a cleanse of all of their passwords and stuff, so to speak. Where would you start? What's your advice? What do you do?
Yeah, I think this is the problem, right? We live in a digital age now where it's so hard to say anything that is going to fully prevent you from ever going through a data breach like this. That's just the unfortunate truth. And so we can't really dilly-dally around that, right? Like, that's just the way it is. But there are some very, really true tried and tested methods, such as passwords, which is constantly changing them, trying to make them as complex as possible. But then on top of that, also, using multi-factor authentication. I almost sound like a nagging IT guy at your company, right? Like wherever you work, telling you to constantly change your password.
Yep.
But it's true. It's just the way it is. It's supposed to be something you should constantly be doing. But on top of that, you should also be monitoring your bank and credit card information as much as possible for unusual activity, because ultimately that's really what is all about that we're talking about here. They want to use these different hacking outfits. They want to use this password and these different personal information that personal data that they have on you to be able to find out more about you and then use that to get money out of you. So if you can prevent that in some ways, that does a lot more as well. And it's a really great cybersecurity expert told me, and I've thought about it a lot ever since, is that we wouldn't consider leaving our homes without locking our doors, right? So why is it that we think about these things digitally, because we almost remove ourselves from it in a digital realm, that these things are not affecting us? Whereas, in fact, we have seen a real physical, real monetary, it's a real impact that is caused by these different hacks, right? So we need to take these things seriously in whichever way possible.
Just as a last question, because I don't think I've ever asked anyone this question. How do you teach your kids about strong passwords without overwhelming them?
I first also also tell them about who these hackers are. I think that's the way I would tell people as well, because movies and TV shows and, all sorts of things in the media have framed our version of what these people are who are trying to get you, who you should be doing this to prevent, your passwords and things, who you should be preventing all of this from, in this way that it's this lonely guy sitting in a hoodie, typing on his laptop in a basement. And that's not the case. We're talking about sophisticated businesses. We're talking about, they run like a regime. You work in, shifts 9 to 5. They take vacations in summer and in winter. This is a full operation we're talking about, and there are many of them. And they love working with each other. So framing it in the way to try to understand for anybody, whether that's kids and older people of any age and whatnot, everybody needs to understand who these people are first. And so we've done a lot of stories like that at the Globe, just trying to break down who these people even are. Do we even know them? Why are they always one step ahead of us? And that helps us understand why we should do these different steps.
So interesting. Now, you might be coming to Winnipeg for a story that you don't want to disclose that you're working on, but you mentioned at the start.
I'm going to be the new Manitoba bureau guy at for the Globe in Winnipeg. So
you're
going to see me a lot. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, drop by the studio and maybe we'll find a CBC toque for you.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about that. And I'm excited that we get to talk more now because I'm going to be in Winnipeg talking about all sorts of fun stories that we'll be doing there.
Great to have you on, Timur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Timur Durrani, a national reporter for the Globe and Mail, who's about to be based out of Manitoba, who's also written, of course, extensively on technology and cybersecurity, and this morning walking us through some of the implications of that huge data breach that happened. Now, during the interview, you might have noticed that I popped on the toque. I am wearing one of our new CBC branded toques, and I did that because I had asked you on YouTube to weigh in and tell us if you want to win the toque, and I promised that you would win it. So this is going to go to Brinna. Congratulations, Brinna, on YouTube. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll get that to you after the show as we get your information. That means that Brinna's won our second prize pack as we're celebrating being a sponsor of the curling bonspiel that's happening, the Ironman curling bonspiel. So we have one prize pack left, and to win that, we still want you to call the listener line so we can get your voices on the radio here. It's 788-3205, and give us your best hurry, hard, or sweep. We want to hear you yelling. It's Friday after all. 788-3205. And thanks everybody for watching on YouTube this morning and tuning in that way. In Winnipeg, we are expecting another mild day, and we have business news coming up as well, right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It is clear and -3. We begin Friday with sunshine, and then a few clouds move in this afternoon. Strong south wind developing as well. A high today of 2. If you are in southwest Manitoba, it is a fog advisory this morning. A Winnipeg man who was in a car crash and taken to the Health Sciences Centre for treatment 2 weeks ago left the hospital with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas says he was beaten by HSC security guards. CBC's Rosanna Hempel reports.
Bobby Thomas's face is fractured, but not from the car crash he was in 2 weeks ago. He says hospital security guards beat him that day after waiting more than 8 hours to see a doctor.
What happened to me is not right.
It was in mid-January when Thomas was in a crash in downtown Winnipeg. An ambulance rushed him to Health Sciences Centre. He waited for hours. Then Thomas decided to get medical care elsewhere, but a nurse objected to him leaving. He says he felt belittled and started recording with his phone. Thomas says at first one security guard got involved. Then a group of them followed him to the lobby, where a conversation escalated into a fight outside the hospital.
Somebody had grabbed my hair while they were all on me, and they repeatedly tried to hit my head off the concrete so I could release my arms so they could put handcuffs on me.
Thomas says his cheekbone is fractured and he suffered nerve damage. Health officials say they're reviewing the incident and their security training. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million in meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. Komalpreet Sidhu held his head low as he appeared in the Brandon courtroom yesterday. The semi-trailer he was driving was on its way from California to Winnipeg January 14th when it was searched at the border near Boissevain. He is charged with importing and possessing a controlled substance for trafficking. Among his bail conditions, $140,000 in cash and sureties. As well, he has to wear a GPS tracker and adhere to a curfew, and he is allowed only one cell phone that is not password protected. The man charged in the 2007 killing of a Métis woman reported having been sexually abused by a relative when he was 17. Kevin Charles Q also told parole board officers he was Indigenous, although his family denies their Métis heritage. The board revoked his statutory release in 2019 over concerns he would reoffend. He had been serving a 5-year sentence after pleading guilty to assaulting 2 women in BC. The board said Q reported feeling estranged from his family and culture. RCMP have charged the man in the murder of 24-year-old Crystal Saunders. Those charges were just laid last week. Well, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, is in Ukraine.
Canada is a proud friend of Ukraine, and we have stood firm with Ukrainians as they're fighting for their freedom since
Joly met with her Ukrainian counterpart this morning. A statement says they were negotiating a Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement and discussing long-term security commitments. Joly will also take part in efforts to address the unlawful transportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. This is her 4th trip to Ukraine since the beginning of 2022. A ship carrying 16,000 sheep and cattle has returned to port in Australia. It set sail in early January for the Middle East, but was turned back because of the Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The animals have been stuck on board in extreme heat ever since. While back in port, Australian authorities are so far not letting the animals off the ship, citing biosecurity concerns. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A bear cub that entered Manitoba on 3 legs is now walking on all 4s. The cub was first spotted in Ingolf, Ontario last month, hobbling on a broken front leg with an open wound. He was seen again several days later in Falcon Lake, and the cub finally ended up at Black Bear Rescue Manitoba. Owner Judy Stern says he's recovering well after surgery.
He was very stressed looking when he arrived. He would have been in great pain on top of everything else, so he's doing so much better.
Stern says the cub, nicknamed Ace, weighed about 20 pounds when they got him. He now weighs a healthy 98 pounds. For the second time in less than a month, a Winnipegger is going to be rubbing elbows with some of the biggest stars in showbiz. Amanda Busse will be a seat filler at Sunday's Grammy Awards. She was also a seat filler at the Emmy Awards just last month. Busse says she's excited about seeing her favorite singers perform.
Billie Eilish will be performing, and I'm really excited to see her perform, as well as Joni Mitchell. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited, hopefully, to sit next to Taylor Swift, maybe, Harry Styles, anyone at all. I will be completely thrilled.
I'll talk about celebrities. The celebrity groundhog, Shubenacadie Sam, slowly waddled out of her tiny barn this morning. That was in Nova Scotia. In Gobbler's Knob in Pennsylvania, Punxsutawney Phil also came out. Both are predicting an early spring. They did not see their shadows. No reason to hide. So they are predicting an early spring on this Groundhog Day. We will hear from Manitoba Merv a little bit later this morning. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I don't know what gave it away. Maybe puddles? Couldn't resist. It's melting out there. So Groundhog Day's lost a little luster today. But
They're pretty smart, those little rodents.
We'll have some more fun with it later. You're right, with Manitoba Merv. Actually, there's events going on at the Forks. So Shanley Vidal's going to be out, our community reporter. So we'll have some fun with that after 8. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, it's time for the regional forecast with Avi Adiyemi.
Good morning, Winnipeg. It's clear out there. The temperature currently sits at -3 degrees. We're looking for a mix of sun and clouds today with the wind and, of course, a high of 2. For folks in western Manitoba, we just need to give you the heads up. There's a fog advisory all the way from Melita up to Riding Mountain and Dauphin area, and then further east to the Port de la Prairie area with a near zero visibility at times. So you need to be very careful on the highway. And if we look at other parts of the region, Brandon is currently at -2 with that fog advisory near zero visibility. Thompson is currently at -4. It's cloudy up there. You're heading to a high of 3 degrees. Churchill is currently at -10, heading to a high of -3. It's cloudy up there. Gimli, -4, heading to a high of 2 degrees. Dauphin is currently at -3, heading to a high of 5 degrees. Steinbach is currently clear with currently at -3, heading to a high of 2 degrees. And Morris and the rest of the Pembina Valley region is under that fog advisory, of course, and they're currently at -2. But in Winnipeg, we are at -3 degrees.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the commute now, once again with Corey.
Yeah, really clear so far out there on the roads. A little slippery on the sidewalks, a little slushy in parts as well. But as we just heard from Abby, the fog really is the biggest issue, especially if you plan to hit the highways in western Manitoba right now. Even just taking a look at Manitoba 511, which updates highway conditions, pretty much all the highways in west of Winnipeg really are being reported as reduced visibility right now, including the number 1. So just do be careful if you do plan to hit the highways today. Visibility might be quite poor because of that fog, but clear here in the city so far. If you see anything else going on out there on the roads, on the highways, bike lanes, sidewalks, give me a call and I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
I didn't mess up my hair by taking my toque off. We just gave a toque away to a YouTube watcher who's watching the show this morning, and Corey said, I was showing it off during the interview, and Corey figured on, I saw you post, you thought I'd mess it up.
Yes, I'm a YouTube commenter now.
Oh, look, I'm a pro. Look at that.
I was kind of hoping you'd have like a big static going on. But...
It turned out all right. So congratulations again to Brenna. And we're already getting calls. So if you want to win our winter prize pack, give us your hurry hard at 788-3205. And good morning to everybody watching on YouTube. I noticed you're mentioning some of the neighborhoods you're watching and listening from. So good morning to those who are up in St. B and NK. Phil DeMonte is up. He's here with our business report. Hi, Phil.
So your hair wasn't all staticky, was it?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little bit in the back, but it is the season of giving people shocks, right?
Fair enough.
Did the governor of the Bank of Canada shock us all by saying he cannot solve the country's housing crisis? He was speaking before a Tiff Macklin parliamentary committee yesterday. What's his argument? What's his framing here about?
Yeah, he was grilled before the Finance Committee and the Commons about Canada's housing affordability problem. Said there isn't really much a central bank can do to fix this issue. Now, he wasn't being blasé about the problem. He was saying, look, we had low interest rates, didn't help. We had high interest rates, didn't help. And central bankers generally just raise and lower interest rates. He made an obvious point. We need more houses getting built, and that's not happening right now. Here's the problem, Marcy. In 2015, the average house in Canada cost about $413,000. With inflation, that would be about $516,000 now if you just did it that way. But that isn't the cost. The average home in 2023 across the country, $657,000. That's 30% above the rate of inflation. Now, we know it is generally centralized around Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, but it's starting to leak into places like Calgary and Edmonton. Experts say a big factor behind the soaring home prices is Canada's high level of immigration. More than 2 million new Canadians came here in the past 2 years. So that spiked the demand for housing, not a surprise, whether it's single family or rentals. But Canadian builders aren't building. Housing starts across the country down 2% in December. High interest rates are an obvious issue for construction companies because they borrow money, but also a lack of skilled labor. Something like 20% of the building trades, they're going to retire over the next few years. So the sector actually wants more immigrants. They just want skilled ones. Politics, though, this is a big problem because any incentive you give, the home buyers vote. So any incentive you give, though, to first-time home buyers especially, all it does is drive prices up. But politically, it's really hard for elected officials to give big tax breaks and subsidies to developers. You know, that works well on the doorstep. So as a result, Macklin pointing out more or less that getting home prices down in this country is going to be a particularly difficult issue over the next while.
To another story, a big investor, I understand, wants to turn Indigo, the book chain, into a private company. What's going on?
Yeah, Jerry Schwartz, longtime Canadian investor, wants to take Indigo private. That means the company would no longer trade on the stock exchange. Doubly interesting, though, because Schwartz is married to Indigo CEO Heather Reisman. Schwartz's investment company, Trilogy, offering $2.25 a share for the 39% of Indigo's outstanding stock it doesn't own or control. Now, the $2.25 is an improvement over the current stock price of $1.48, and it's one reason you might take the bookseller private. You think the stock is undervalued. 5 years ago, a share of Indigo, more than $10, but It's seen its market share erode because of the likes of Amazon, but it's also gone through a lot of turmoil in the executive offices. Reisman retired back in 2022, but she had to return as CEO last September, growing financial losses, and she didn't like the strategy where Indigo was going to sell more non-book items. A major reason also to get off the stock exchange, you don't want to reveal or have to reveal company details and explain them publicly like you do, if you're a public company. That's because most of the usual investor protections don't apply to private firms. And Indigo under Reisman and Schwartz, with his other investment company, Onyx, they've been always really reluctant to give out many details about their operations.
Before we look at markets, Subway is selling out of its new cookie. It's a foot long, is that right?
Yeah, that's not the healthiest cookie I've ever seen. 70% of the recommended calorie intake for the average Canadian adult, but the foot-long biscuits are selling
70% of your day?
Yeah,
in one
just
cookie?
if you had two, you're done.
Okay.
Eat nothing else. But the cookies are selling I wanted to use as hotcakes. It was launched on National Cookie Day last December at some selected Subways in the U.S. Cookie resembles a chocolate chip hot dog and comes in a big box. It's a nice box. It debuted actually in 2022 at a single Miami outlet. They sold out within 2 hours. So the bells went off the light went off in the Subway executive offices, and they decided to make it permanent. Part of a sidekicks menu, which includes a chorizo soft pretzel you can buy. Subway says they sold more than 3.5 million of these snacks since January 22nd, so like a week and a half. So popular they had to drop it from its app and delivery service like DoorDash. They're rationing it right now. I think you can get it in Canada, maybe on a limited basis. It's a little unclear to me, but it has been sold up here anyway.
Do you know what? It doesn't look that big. Like if you look at it for the amount of calories that are in it, it's kind of almost sobering. What's going on in markets this morning?
Right now, good earnings in Europe pushing those stocks higher. Germany, France up more than 0.5%. But the stock market in China hitting new lows. Shanghai down 1.5%. Oil up 14 cents, $73.96 a barrel. Gold's up $2, but a high level, $2,073 U.S. an ounce, and the Canadian dollar up close to 1/5 of a cent, 74.74 cents U.S.
Have a great weekend, Phil DeMont.
Same to you, Marcy.
With business news, that is Phil DeMont. Well, up next.
Groundhog time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
That's, of course, a trailer of the classic 1993 Bill Murray film Groundhog Day. The occasion's marked every year in ceremonies all over Canada on February 2nd, today, and across the states as well. So as the superstition goes, if a groundhog emerges from its burrow on this day and it sees its shadow, it's going to go back into its den, and then winter lasts 6 more weeks. But if it does not see its shadow, spring will come early. And we already have some early groundhog results I'll share after this item. But first, let's learn more about it and where this all came from. CBC's Candice Lipsky explains it doesn't necessarily mean, despite the tradition and superstition, that every year things go as planned.
Canadians love their groundhogs. The rodents, also known as woodchucks, can bring us good news about the end of winter. But from injuries to no-shows, sometimes Groundhog Day has its hiccups, and with that in mind, here are some of them from the past few years. Last year in Quebec, Groundhog Day took a grim turn. Things started normally in Val d'Espoir. There was some dancing and singing at a Groundhog Day event, all people waiting to find out what predictions Fred le Marmotte might make. But slowly it became clear something wasn't right.
Je vous annonce la mort de Fred.
Fred was, in fact, dead. Organizers of the event quickly pivoted, sourcing a stuffed toy groundhog. But more bad news came. The fake groundhog predicted 6 more weeks of winter. 6 years ago, Nova Scotia's famed groundhog Sam, who lived at a wildlife park, was the first to emerge from his lair on Groundhog Day. Sam didn't see its shadow, which was good news, but it did make a run for it, making a mad dash up a fence at its enclosure. Luckily, CBC's Brett Ruskin was on scene.
Oh my God! Whoa! Sorry. Yay, Brett!
Brett managed to stop the escape and walked away with just minor injuries. All in a day's work, they say. Move over, Sam. Nova Scotia has another weather-predicting creature. The past few years, a 50-something-year-old crustacean named Lucy has been making weather predictions on Groundhog Day. And it turns out Sam and Lucy have made some of the same predictions over the years. Lucy isn't the only unusual Groundhog Day non-groundhog. From armadillos to fish to bears to dogs dressed as groundhogs, these days it seems like anything goes. Woody the woodchuck was Saskatchewan's unofficial weather-predicting woodchuck. The rodent typically would sleep in its owner's sock drawer and was also known to predict how the Saskatchewan Roughriders season would go.
Coming off their best regular season in a decade, it all unraveled and came to a chilly conclusion in their own stadium.
But in 2018, his owners, who rescued the critter, weren't sure it would be alive for Groundhog Day. That's because Woody had earlier been diagnosed with diabetes by vets in Saskatoon. But Woody became a vegetarian and made it to the special day. Woody emerged from the sock drawer and didn't see his shadow. Woody the woodchuck died in May of 2018.
I loved the audio of when the groundhog got loose and they were chasing it. So we've already had some events this morning going on for Groundhog Day. Shubenacadie Sam in Nova Scotia and in Gobbler's Knob, Punxsutawney Phil both waddled out and could not see their shadows. And so that means spring's coming early. Later this morning, our community reporter Shanley Vidal is going to be out at the Forks, and we'll see what Manitoba Merv has to say.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Lift off.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
Well, I've said this a couple of times. I'm incorrect this morning. For some reason, my head is at the Forks. But of course, Shanley will be out, our community reporter, on Groundhog Day. And if she's looking for Merv, she's at Okamic Marsh, and that's exactly where she's going to be. So we'll check in with her after 8 o'clock this morning and see how things are going there. Nice morning to be out and about. A little crunchy out there, and it could be some foggy issues in parts of Manitoba. But here in the city, clear, -3, and we are expecting cloud cover this morning and a high of 3 degrees. So we're still on the positive side of the scale here. The fog advisory could be serious. It could be near zero visibility, expected or occurring throughout this morning in areas around Portage, Morton Winkler, Brandon, Killarney, Pilot Mound, Verdun Souris. It extends to Dauphin and through Minnedosa and Riding Mountain Park, as well as St. Rose and Duck Mountain. So that's a fog advisory for you this morning. Well, next on the program, we're going to continue talking about music. As we alluded to a little bit earlier this hour, the Grammys are coming up this weekend, and there's going to be something really special happening as Canadian Joni Mitchell takes the stage.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot.
Joni Mitchell, legendary singer-songwriter. What a career she's had. It spans more than 6 decades, and she's still going. She recently announced an upcoming concert at California's Hollywood Bowl in the fall. And of course, she has so many awards. She has 9 Grammys, just looking at those. But Joni Mitchell, as I said, she's never performed at the Grammys. So Sunday night, the 80-year-old legend will make her performance debut. Rich Turfry's here to talk about it, host of Drive on CBC Music. Hey there, Rich.
Hey, Marcy.
Wow, what are you making of this? Joni Mitchell at the Grammys. Looking forward to it?
Oh, my God, I'm so excited. I really think that's going to be the story Monday morning, the thing that we'll all be talking about. I mean, you know, the room is going to be filled with the biggest musicians in the world. I suspect that if you were to poll the people in that room, at least 75 to 80% of them, if not more, would cite Joni Mitchell as a influence. So I'm expecting a real hero's welcome. I can't wait until that moment when she's introduced.
Why do you think that she is so well respected across so many, frankly, genres of music, and with so many people respect her in that way? How do you describe the evolution of her career?
It's a difficult thing to sum up. I'm tempted to say that the reason why she's looked up to the way she is simply because she's just a better musician than everybody else. I mean, she had some serious training from the time she was a kid. She started out in classical piano, and then she started writing poetry before she started writing songs. And there are stories of her as a teenager sitting around a campfire, with her friends, performing Miles Davis songs. I mean, who does that? Who does that, right? It's, you'd normally think of, kind of old folk songs or something, but she's performing Miles Davis songs around the campfire. And then when she started out in her career, of course, she made a name for herself as a folk singer, and then she started to get into jazz, and she's a rock and roll Hall of Famer. So, she's done it all. People of all genres of music seem to love and respect her.
Today, I know many female singer-songwriters have been compared with Joni Mitchell, including Taylor Swift. What do you think about that comparison?
Well, it might be the sort of thing that you shrug off at first, but if you stop and think about it, it does make a lot of sense because, both are confessional songwriters, writing their own songs, often about relationships. And then there's always a lot of speculation over who the songs are about. They did that with Joni Mitchell so much back in the day, and they do that now with Taylor Swift. And it's well documented that at the time, in the late 60s and early 70s, the vulnerable nature of some of Joni Mitchell's songs was almost too much for some people. But last year, she was interviewed by Elton John, and she said that she thinks that people today are better equipped, more able to face their emotions than they were, back in her day. And when you see someone like Taylor Swift, cut very much from the same cloth, biggest pop star in the world by a mile, I think that lends a lot of weight to what she was saying.
That's such an interesting sort of observation because I never really thought about. I've thought about that generationally before, Rich. Like the fact that what generations would have never talked openly about emotions, you just never did it. The boomers, my parents, my grandparents. I'm Gen X. We kind of started to. We kind of put it out there for all to see. It's like right. But now the younger generations getting it into art, getting into music. But Joni Mitchell doing that as a trailblazer. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a famous story of her playing the Blue album for Chris Christopherson right before it came out. And apparently he felt very embarrassed. And when it was over, he said, Joni, you got to save a little for yourself. Like it was almost too much for him to bear.
Speaking of that album, I mean, the classic 1971, Blue comes out. Not only as one of her best, but also one of the best albums ever released. Do you have a favorite Joni Mitchell song or album? Is it Blue?
Some days of the week, it certainly is. It's number 3 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the greatest albums of all time. So it's widely regarded as a masterpiece, regardless of genre. Lately, I've been spending a lot of time with the Court and Spark album from 1974. It came out just a few years later. That's where she first started really experimenting with jazz and infusing that into her compositions. And even though she was beginning to experiment there, that became the biggest album of her career. I think to this day, it's her best-selling album. And I've been spending a lot of time with that one lately. It's so many great songs. A bunch of my favorites are on that album.
Well, I would talk to you more, but I'm only saying goodbye because we need to hear some Joni Mitchell.
Yes.
So you take care. Yeah. Enjoy the Grammys this weekend. Can't wait to see what she brings to the stage. Rich, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Marcy. Great talking to you.
Rich Fry, host of Drive on CBC Music. Here's Joni Mitchell and Carrie.
Night I couldn't sleep. Oh, it sure is hard to leave you, Carrie, but it's really not my home. Oh. My fingernails are filthy. I got beach tar on my feet, and I miss my clean linen and my fancy French cologne. Oh, Carrie, get out your cane, and I'll put on some silver. Oh, you're a mean old daddy, but I like you fine. Hey! Come on down to the Mermaid Cafe, and I will buy you a bottle of wine, and we'll laugh and toast tonight. wash our empty glasses down. Let's have a round for these freaks and these soldiers, and a round for these friends of mine. We'll have another round for that bright red devil who keeps me in this tourist town. Oh, carrying it out chicane, and oh, put on some silver.
Joni Mitchell, will she do this tune on Sunday? We're going to have to see what she performs at the Grammys. First time ever taking to the stage. By the way, Rich Turfry, who we just talked to there, of course, host of Drive on CBC Music, and you can hear Drive across Canada on CBC Music weekdays from 3 to 6. cbc.ca/music if you want more details. Heather Wells is in with our local headlines now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million in meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. Kumalpreet Sidhu appeared in the Brandon courtroom yesterday. Among his bail conditions, paying $140,000 cash. He has to wear a GPS tracker, and he has to adhere to a curfew. So we'll hear more about that. And a bear cub that hobbled at least 16 kilometers on 3 legs from Ontario to Manitoba is now on the road to recovery. It had been injured, and it was taken to Black Bear Rescue Manitoba, where it is now healing. So we'll hear that story as well in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, if you're thinking about the day and how to dress, we're probably still in wearing layers because our daytime high is going to get above zero again in Winnipeg. Our high 3 degrees. It is clear and -3 right now, and there's freezing fog over in Brandon that I'm going to mention because there's a fog advisory that's been issued for that area, as well extending through Portage, Morden, Verdon, up to Dauphin, and through Riding Mountain Park as well. And Swan River included in this too. So take it easy if you're in a foggy area. Call us on the commute if you need, 788-3093. In the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to continue talking about music, but we're going to actually be in a conversation with a Black musician here in Winnipeg who says being in a non-Black dominated genre can be challenging. And we're going to talk about why, and we'll hear his experiences. So that's coming up after 7. He'll be in studio. In addition, can performing push-ups, good old-fashioned push-ups, raise awareness for mental health? Well, there's a Winnipeg gym that is hoping so. Jim Agapito will have that story. And an update on the inquest for the family of Matchwar Madut, who was shot and killed by police. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current. It was pure chaos. During morning rush hour, it simply collapsed.
It has been 10 years since the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, where over 1,000 garment workers died. The CBC's Fifth Estate has found that not enough has been done to improve work conditions, including by Canadian companies. What's coming up on The Current?
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. There are more problems to tell you about regarding the Canadian Air Force's Cyclones. A defect in the maritime helicopter's main rotor blades has been reported. It's forcing technicians to perform more frequent inspections on the troubled fleet. The CBC's Murray Brewster reports.
After looking at a copy of an internal airworthiness document, this is the reaction from Defence Minister Bill Blair.
I think my first priority is making sure that the men and women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces can do their job safely, and that the equipment that we send them out to do the important job that they do is fit for purpose.
CBC News obtained a copy of the Air Force Risk Management Report. It shows the U.S. manufacturer Sikorsky warned Canada in June 2022 about a potential issue with some of the Cyclone's main rotor blades, defects that could cause the blades to come apart in flight. Subsequent testing has discovered 4 defective blades. More testing is being done on 7 others. None of the Cyclone blades have failed in flight. Blair says the Defence Department has a plan and is confident in the Cyclones.
I rely on the advice we receive from D&D and from CAV, the people that operate them and also those who are responsible for their maintenance and procurement.
In the meantime, the Cyclone blades will have to be inspected every 50 hours. Jeremiah Gertler, a U.S. military aviation analyst, says it's a disruption.
They should be concerned about this because with the more frequent inspections, it's possible that they'll be able to use the Cyclones less. They'll spend less time in the air and more time getting checked out.
The defective blades are being returned to the manufacturer. It is, however, part of a growing list of concerns about the Cyclone, including cracked tail rotors and a combat system that the Air Force is scrambling to replace. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is on a surprise visit to Ukraine. It's Melanie Joly's fourth trip there in 2 years. She says she wants to signal Canada's steadfast support in the face of Russian aggression. That includes agreements on trade, security, and Ukraine's stolen children. Abby Kuga-Dawson is in London following developments.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Melanie Joly says Canada's support for Ukraine is unwavering.
Since day one, we have provided at this point $9.5 billion of aid, including $2.4 billion in military aid.
Joly is expected to announce Canada's role in a new initiative, the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children. In recent days, a conference in Latvia highlighted the plight of Ukrainian children who have been forcibly taken to Russia by the Russian military. Kyiv says more than 19,500 children have been taken. Fewer than 400 have been rescued.
The importance of bringing back these children home cannot be understated. It is a matter of our own humanity.
The Canadian government says it will offer technical expertise and resources and work with other nations to assist Ukraine.
Canada will use its diplomatic network around the world to reach out as if these children were Canadian children.
Joly's surprise visit comes just weeks before the second anniversary of Russia's wider-scale invasion of Ukraine. Abby Kuga-Dawson, CBC News, London.
In Kenya, residents of a Nairobi neighborhood reacting to an explosion and fireball. At least 3 people are dead, hundreds more wounded in Kenya's capital. A truck loaded with gas reportedly blew up. Homes and a warehouse were caught in the fireball. The explosion and fire happened late at night when many people were in their homes. It's been a decade since the deadly collapse of a garment factory in Bangladesh. More than 1,100 workers died in the tragedy, many of them making clothes for Canadians. Among the companies using the factory, Canadian fast fashion giant Joe Fresh. In the aftermath, the Loblaw-owned company promised big changes, including safe factories and fair wages. An investigation by the CBC's Fifth Estate raises questions about whether Loblaw has delivered on those promises. Mark Kelly went to Bangladesh and has our story.
The collapse of Rana Plaza sent shockwaves that resonated all the way to Canada.
This was a senseless tragedy. It should not have happened.
In 2013, Loblaw's Galen Weston promised fair wages and safer working conditions for the people who make their Joe Fresh clothes in Bangladesh.
This factory makes clothes for Joe Fresh, a Canadian company.
But a look into safety inspection reports tells a different story.
These are the inspection reports, and you've had ongoing fire safety issues.
In the 21 factories used to make Joe Fresh clothes since 2019, we counted 176 documented safety violations. As for wages, for months workers were protesting for better pay. Lazina Akhtar makes pants for Joe Fresh, 11 hours a day, 6 days a week. She makes about $150 a month.
I am not happy.
You're not happy.
In a statement, Loblaw says it supports an increase to the minimum wage, adding we remain committed to transparency and accountability in our global supply chain to drive positive change and protect the rights and well-being of workers where our products are made. The government recently increased the minimum wage, but workers still earn about $500 a month below what's considered a living wage for clothes made in Bangladesh. Mark Kelly, CBC News, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Made in Bangladesh 10 years later. Airs tonight at 9 p.m. on the Fifth Estate on CBC Television and CBC Gem, or stream it on YouTube after 1 p.m. Eastern. Police are investigating after shots were fired into the house of a BC Khalistan activist. It happened overnight Thursday in Surrey, BC. Maninder Singh is with the BC Gurdwaras Council. He identifies the owner of the home as Simranjit Singh and says bullets nearly struck a child in the house.
Up to 20 plus shots fired into his home, including up to about 2 feet away from his 6-year-old that was sleeping upstairs and went right by his bed. It was quite a horrifying scene for him.
No injuries were reported. Singh says the owner of the home was a close friend of murdered Surrey Temple leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. RCMP says this was an isolated incident. In Yukon, a bout of unseasonably warm weather has thrown a last-minute twist and turn for the organizers of the historic dog sledding event. The Yukon Quest sets off on Saturday, but as Katie Todd reports, The first section of the trail is solid ice, leaving organizers scrambling.
Shipyards Park in Whitehorse is where the epic race begins. It's where mushers on the Yukon quest set off on their journey through the snow. Instead, a sea of ice, brought on by a strange spell of warm weather this week, temperatures above zero and rain, then dropping to the minus mid-teens. Race director Benjamin Smith says the slick conditions just aren't safe for fans, staff or the dog teams.
The concerns are that there would be difficulty in controlling a dog team as they move through the trail. Given the ice, given the lack of snow, it'd be hard to get snow hooks in, it would be hard to get dogs under control.
So they're moving the starting line 25 kilometres north. Michelle Phillips is one of 18 mushers taking part this year. She won the 450-mile category last year and says the change in plans doesn't calm her nerves about the icy conditions.
The trail is pretty long and there's many sections, so it just means you're avoiding the part of the river, so that would have been a lot of overflow probably and glare ice, but there's a lot of other sections up ahead that are pretty technical.
Smith says outside Whitehorse, trail conditions are looking good. Mushers will compete in 100, 250 and 450 mile races. The finish lines are unchanged. Katie Todd, CBC News, Whitehorse.
A ship carrying 16,000 sheep and cattle has returned to port in Australia. It set sail in early January for the Middle East, but was turned back due to the Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The animals have been stuck on board in extreme heat since then. While back in port, Australian authorities are so far not letting the animals off the ship, citing biosecurity concerns. And finally, Atlantic Canada's most famous rodent meteorologist is prognosticating an early spring.
Here she is.
What's
Yay!
I saw what
Well, what do you think, mascot Sam? I think it is pretty safe to say that although that was a quick, fleeting duck into the Christmas trees, I think it's pretty safe to say that Sam did not see her shadow.
Shumanakity-san took some time to come out of her burrow when the door opened. And when she did, she didn't see her shadow. And if her expertise is to be believed, that means an early spring is in the forecast. Sam, the first of the North American groundhogs to offer up her predictions, about half an hour later.
Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain.
Groundhog Day. The same thing happened again. Punxsutawney Phil came out of his burrow in Gobbler's Knob, Pennsylvania. He also saw no shadow. Double confirmation that an early spring is on its way. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app or on YouTube. Thanks for being with us. Mild again in Winnipeg. Not quite so mild as midweek, but we're still going to get above zero today. Abby's going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes here on the show. Well, on the program this hour, we have ongoing coverage of the case of Machwar Madut. He is the man who was shot and killed by police in 2019. The family is still waiting for that inquest to start. Last week in a CBC exclusive, we talked to them, and they talked about the impact that waiting 5 years for this has had on them. So we have an update this hour. We're going to hear from the lawyer representing the family. There was a meeting this week, and there are some developments that are going to be happening in April, so we'll hear more about that just before 8. But we have other coverage as well. Stay with us. Of other stories. And one that I want to mention so you don't go anywhere is we're going to have an interview with a musician in Winnipeg, a local black musician, who says he found it difficult to find others who like the same kind of music, the same genre he did when he was growing up. But now things have shifted and changed. So we're going to talk about that through the lens of what it's like being a black artist in the pop punk genre. So looking forward to that conversation. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news center with other headlines developing today. Hi there.
Hello. Well, a Winnipeg man who was taken to the Health Sciences Centre after a car crash 2 weeks ago says he left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas alleges he was beaten by hospital security guards. Thomas says it happened while he was leaving the emergency department after waiting more than 8 hours for care. So we'll hear what happened there. And the Fairmont Winnipeg is back under familiar ownership. Lombard Hospitality Limited is a subsidiary of James Richardson and Sons, and it has announced it has acquired the Fairmont and will once again have that hotel form part of the JRSL Richardson Centre at Portage in Maine. The hotel will continue to operate under the Fairmont brand. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi, what's going on in traffic?
Good morning, Winnipeg. As you step out, it's a crisp morning with a current temperature at -3 degrees. The skies are clear and the wind is gently blowing from the south. Looking ahead, we're in for the sun to make an appearance. As we approach the noon period, expect a transition from a mix of sun and cloud. And the high today will reach a mild 2 degrees. And tonight, the winds would come down. The clearing is expected to be late this evening, and then the wind will continue from the south. And away from Winnipeg, we are hearing that for folks in western Manitoba, there are fog advisories all the way from Melita up onto Riding Mountain and Dauphin areas, and then further east to the Port La Prairie area with a near zero visibility, so you need to be very careful on the road. Winnipeg is currently at -2 degrees, and it's mild.
No doubt it's mild. Okay, we're going to get to the commute in a moment with you, Corey.
Okay.
But first, Abby was talking about the weather today. So it is certainly not fur coat weather. But people might have noticed the meme going around. So now that Chris Streveler is going to be back in town and playing quarterback for the Bombers again. The Bombers have sent out this meme that I think is kind of cool. It's just a dresser. It's got the fur coat hanging up and then a cowboy hat on top. And of course, that's because that's what he wore for the Grey Cup parade here in 2019. But we have sports this half hour. We'll talk a little bit more about sports stories overall. But what we did, knowing Streveler was coming back, is Abby and I found this piece of audio yesterday.
Yes.
That's super fun. So to remind us what a character he is when he comes back to town, and hopefully we'll be able to go thrift shopping with him. Now, this is why we want to go thrift shopping in Winnipeg with Chris Streveler, the Bombers, because in 2019 we got to meet the players. I was covering Grey Cup in Calgary, and I found myself surrounded by quarterbacks, and we were asking fun questions. And Chris Streveler kind of meandered in and said, "I want in on this." And here's when we learned about his love of thrift. Chris Streveler, welcome to the Circle.
You're in the show now.
You're in the show now. You're missing a morning show radio interview for CBC.
I had some FOMO when I saw everyone getting interviewed.
If you want in, you got to do the first question. What Winnipeg stereotype best suits you? You're a fighter, you're prairie tough, you're cheap, or you had a mullet as a kid?
Oh, I'm so cheap. There was a month last year where I spent $70 the whole month. Besides my rent, obviously, because I have to pay that, but $70 the whole month.
Where's that come from, that cheapness?
My dad. Yeah, he's so cheap.
He responsible, or is it like you're not spending that money, Chris?
Now we're just calling people. He's responsibly cheap, but yeah, no. He said like I get all my clothes from thrift stores and stuff. I mean, these jeans clearly don't fit me, so I got them at a discounted price. So,
You're just seeing those jeans. The guys were bugging him. They wouldn't let him live them down. They were the skinniest jeans, and maybe they didn't fit him. I don't know.
So Winnipeg.
I know, it's so Winnipeg, right? Anyway, hopefully that's where the idea comes from. So people might have been wondering why, we were thinking about going thrift shopping with him, but that could be a good welcome home, I think.
And I wonder if that fur coat then was thrift shopped.
Probably. Yeah. Where do you buy a new fur coat?
Yeah, this is true.
Now, in 2024, that's one of my questions.
Yeah.
All right. That's Corey Funk. He's here to talk about the commute.
Yeah, really the biggest issue out there right now is that visibility in Western Manitoba on those highways. That fog advisory is in effect. Maybe very little visibility if you're on the highways. Pretty much anything west of Portage La Prairie right now, southwest of Portage La Prairie, right up to the Saskatchewan border. So just be careful out there if you're hitting the highways. Also got a call from Candace around the Headingley area, just outside of Nick's Inn. If you're on Highway number 1, she says the lights are flashing amber if you're on Highway number 1, but if you're going trying to cross Highway 1 at Robin there, it's flashing red. So it's actually really hard to cross Highway 1. So just be careful there. Heads up, because the people aren't obviously stopping as they go through. So if you see anything else, though, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, up first this half hour, growing up in Michigan, Chell Oshunde loved listening to music that sounded like this. But Chell says it was hard, actually, to meet others with similar tastes in music. He says that some people like him in the Black community felt that they had to listen to the stereotypical Black, quote-unquote, genres of music, like hip-hop, rap, and R&B. But for Chell, his experience was a bit different. Chell Oshunde is a Black musician here in Winnipeg, now lives here, and he's here to talk about what it was like for him to try to fit into the punk genre of music that he loved, which was and has been dominated by white artists. And he's in studio. Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Great.
Good. I saw you smiling ear to ear when we were playing that. Tell me why it's one of your faves.
Yeah, like I was just telling you, it's the first time I've heard it other than my computer at home or off my phone or off my AirPods, so it's really interesting. And yeah, that's just the kind of music that I'm drawn to and the kind of music that I am naturally able to write.
Yeah.
You know? And it's great. It's fun.
Who was that?
That was me.
That was you? What song was it?
That song is actually unreleased right now. It's coming out later this year in May. I'm not sure how much of this I can say, but it's coming out in May. I'm going to say that. And yeah, it's going to be our second song ever. We have one song released right now. It's on Spotify. It's on anything you want to. It's called Medical Jargon if you want to find it, by Fold Paper. And that one's going to be the second one.
It's good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I liked it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about this tension and people trying to box you in as a Black artist.
Yeah. It's just that stereotype. When you see a Black person or a Black artist, you automatically assume or put them in a box. R&B, so even indie, a lot of Black artists, are trying out the indie genre now. But when you actually go into the punk genre and the more niche stuff, you don't see as many as many Black artists doing that genre. So, like I said, it was just something I was drawn to, and I thank God I have a natural ability to write it. I've written a ton of songs now. So yeah, it's just something I'm drawn to, and it's I find a really good interest in it because it's really obscure. It's something a lot of people haven't heard about. If you say post-punk, people don't really know what to think, or maybe they think of something. It's not really what it is now.
What post-punk is.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you describe what it is now?
Post-punk, when people hear post-punk, there was like a big uprising of post-punk back in the, 70s, 80s, 90s. And now it's kind of, we're calling it post-punk revivalism because we're trying to like bring it back, make it cool again, turn it into something a little bit different, a little bit, I like to say cooler, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, I just, that's what it is to me now. It's just trying to bring that back, make it fun, make it more accessible.
I mean, punk's roots are in activism and message, and I mean the stereotype is in anger and in yelling and getting it out there. Is there a change? How do you describe the change in the sound? And is there a change in that message aspect of the music, or is that still something that's core to it?
Yeah, big change in sound. For me especially, like when you think of post-punk, you might think of bands like Joy Division or even The Strokes sometimes. Very adjacent to the sound now is still very adjacent, but just throwing in a lot of new sounds, a lot of new kind of drum beats, so it's not a straight drum beat. A lot of syncopated stuff, and then as well as the message is, I like to say that I'm not. That's the part I really don't fit, because usually it's about being rebellious. It's about being angry. I'm not an angry guy, but I can still write the genre. I can still make it sound really, really good. But I like to put a different kind of message behind it. It's whatever comes to me. It's just usually not super angry, usually not super rebellious or anything. You know what I mean?
You talked about growing up in Michigan and sort of where you around you, people were trying to put you in those other genres of music. What challenges have you faced trying to fit into the music scene, if any, here in Winnipeg? Like, what does it mean to be a Black artist doing punk in Winnipeg?
Good Lord, I always say that the Winnipeg music scene is such a blessing to have because it's just so accepting. It's so accepting. It's so easygoing. And being a Black artist, I found that it was easy for me to, get myself integrated into it. I started playing shows. I moved here in 2016 and started playing shows around 2017, and it's literally just been like an upwards, progression in being able to share my music more, playing more shows, playing bigger shows. And so I always say it's a really big blessing for me that I was able to come into this scene. And I'm really thankful for it. Very, very thankful for it.
How do you feel overall about how Black artists are represented within music? Are we making headway there? If you think back in the day, what you would have faced, or is it expanding now, or is it still a fight?
I think it absolutely is expanding. I like to think that I'm, I like to say that I'm one of the first to actually be like, hey, I'm doing this genre. Well, not one of the first, but, trying to get it pushing, trying to get it going. I'm doing the post-punk genre, and hopefully I like to think that that'll make more people rally up and be like, okay, maybe it is cool to try something new. Maybe it is cool to, listen to a genre or other than what I usually listen to. You know what I mean? So I think we're making a lot of headway, and it's doing really well for what it is right now.
Is it important for you to see more Black artists represented in punk?
Absolutely it is. It would just make it that more natural for us to be seen in scenes like that, and in post-punk shows or just regular pop punk or punk shows. I'd like to see it be just normal, because I'm still sticking out like a sore thumb when I'm out at shows and I'm playing shows, because I'm usually the only Black guy. Not the only Black guy, but one of very few.
Yeah.
It'd just be nice to see a lot more.
I was going to ask you about that,
comfortable.
whether or not you've been able to find a mentor, like a Black punk mentor that's a musician. But it sounds like you're mentoring.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to mentor. Definitely. I will say there's been a lot of folks that I've kind of looked up to. And one name coming to me right now is Jeremy Haywood Smith. He's the lead singer of Jaywood and doing very, very well right now. And he was a really big help for me when I came into the scene as a Black artist. Played a lot of shows with him. I still play in his band. We're going on tour in Toronto next week.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's a name I immediately think of.
I find we have that here really as well. We do have pretty strong mentorships.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that grew out of Jerry Atwell's experience or so many other people in our music community otherwise, or the late Jerry Atwell, I should say. But there's been a lot of strong mentorships. So
absolutely.
Lead the way, Chal. We want to save some time to play some more music. That okay with you?
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
That is Chal Oshuntoday, a Black musician here in Winnipeg, talking about punk, which is his thing. Here's an upcoming song, a little bit more, from a band that he's in called Fold Paper. So this tune's called Nothing to Report. So we'll play a little bit more, and we promise in future shows to play the full tune. We're listening to Nothing to Report. It's from the band Fold Paper. And Chal Oshuntoday heading off to Toronto to make Winnipeg proud, going on tour. Very cool. 7:26 a.m. It is time for morning sports, and Scott Regere's back. Hi there.
Hey there, Marcy.
So NHL All-Star Weekend well underway. What's standing out for you?
Well, I think the enthusiasm and the skill on display last night, Marcy, as the Professional Women's Hockey League All-Stars played their game. Team Billie Jean King won it thanks to a hat-trick by Savannah Harmon, whose day job is with the PWHL franchise in Ottawa. After she scored her third goal last night, Harmon's teammates celebrated by throwing their gloves on the ice. So a bit of a twist on the traditional hat throwing after a hat trick. Close to 17,000 people on hand for the game at Toronto's Scotiabank Arena, which is, of course, usually the home of the Maple Leafs. And that rink is going to be filled to capacity in a couple of weeks for the PWHL game between Toronto and Montreal. Tickets for that game sold out almost immediately yesterday, making for what will be just the latest record-setting crowd, Marcy, for a women's pro hockey game. So the latest sign of growth for that league. Here's another, though. Connor McDavid told reporters yesterday the Oilers often have PWHL games on the TVs in their dressing room. They love watching them, so an endorsement from the best player on earth, that doesn't hurt either.
Agreed. And McDavid was busy, actually, with other duties last night as well.
Yeah, he's one of the four captains, Marcy, for Saturday's NHL All-Star Game. That said, he left some of the picking and choosing to his celebrity co-captain last night, actor Will Arnett. Listening to the Arrested Development star, McDavid didn't really have a choice.
I've mentored a lot of coaches. Jurgen Klopp called me last week asking for some advice over in Liverpool, and I just told him, stay strong. But this means a lot. Bragging rights in my hometown, for real. To answer your question, for real, bragging rights means a lot. And sure, if I win, I don't know if we're going to get a tattoo or anything. You know, I'm 53. Am I going to rub it in Michael's face? Yeah, a lot.
Michael would be Michael Bublé, the crooner who will co-captain another team with Canucks star Quinn Hughes, so a strong Vancouver connection there. Tonight, Marcy, the focus for the All-Stars will be on the skills competition, which is not gimmicky. Thank goodness. So no shooting pucks at surfboards in Miami or blackjack competitions in Vegas. Just a dozen players competing in familiar events like fastest skater, hardest and most accurate shot. Old school then, although the prize money is not something we've seen in the past. $1 million American to whoever comes out on top.
Wow. Wonder why they added that.
So it might be competitive for a change.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's finish with football. We already were alluding to Chris Streveler earlier this hour, talking about, coming back to town. He did speak to media for the first time since re-signing with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. What were your impressions of it?
I was struck by how sincere he is in the admiration for the city. Streveler said of Winnipeg that it's a gritty town that resonates with him as a gritty player. He also expressed deep love and respect for the Canadian game. That was the most apparent when he was asked about probably his most viral moment when he was south of the border. 3 years ago, playing with the Cardinals, Streveler came on for an injured Kyler Murray through an interception. This is how former quarterback Boomer Esiason described it at the time.
What a horrific mistake by Streveler. This isn't the CFL. You can't just take chances and throw the ball down the middle of the field.
When prompted to respond to this, Streveler said, well, he didn't mind the personal criticism. He did take umbrage with how the CFL was portrayed.
Well, I wouldn't say it was unfair to me by any means. I made a mistake. I threw a pick six. That's a bad play. I thought it was unfair to the league. And it's unfortunate that that's maybe the impression of the CFL that was given to people because of that comment and me making a mistake at a critical point in the game. I would have just asked for clarification as to what he meant, but I'm not going to press him. You're on the air, you say something, comes off. It's not personal. He's just doing his job just like I'm trying to do my job.
There you are, Chris Streveler. Welcome back. It's going to be great to have him.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Regere with Morning Sports. If you need us on the commute, 788-3093, especially if you're having issues with fog in western Manitoba and up through Dauphin and Riding Mountain Park, give us a call on that traffic line, 788-3093. Stay with us. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is clear and it is still feeling mild. You begin Friday at -3 right now in Winnipeg. We'll continue warming up to a high today of 2. It's going to get a little bit windy later today. A Winnipeg man who was in a car crash and taken to the Health Sciences Centre for treatment 2 weeks ago left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas says he was beaten by HSC security guards. CBC's Rosanna Hempel has that story.
Bobby Thomas's face is fractured, but not from the car crash he was in 2 weeks ago.
He says hospital security guards beat him that day after waiting more than 8 hours to see a doctor.
What happened to me is not right.
It was in mid-January when Thomas was in a crash in downtown Winnipeg. An ambulance rushed him to Health Sciences Centre. He waited for hours. Then Thomas decided to get medical care elsewhere, but a nurse objected to him leaving. He says he felt belittled and started recording with his phone. Thomas says at first one security guard got involved. Then a group of them followed him to the lobby, where a conversation escalated into a fight outside the hospital.
Somebody had grabbed my hair while they were all on me, and they repeatedly tried to hit my head off the concrete so I could release my arms so they could put handcuffs on me.
Thomas says his cheekbone is fractured and he suffered nerve damage. Health officials say they're reviewing the incident and their security training. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million of meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. Kamalpreet Sidhu held his head low as he appeared in the Brandon courtroom yesterday. The semi-trailer he was driving was on its way from California to Winnipeg January 14th when it was searched at the border near Boissevain. He is charged with importing and possessing a controlled substance for trafficking. Among his bail conditions, $140,000. He has to wear a GPS tracker and adhere to a curfew. The Fairmont Winnipeg is back under familiar ownership. Lombard Hospitality Limited is a subsidiary of James Richardson & Sons. It has announced it has acquired the hotel, and once again, it will form part of the JRSL Richardson Centre at Portage in Maine. It was originally developed and owned by the Richardsons, but was sold in 2000. The hotel will continue to operate under the Fairmont brand, and all employees have been offered continued employment with the hotel. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is on a surprise visit to Ukraine. It is Mélanie Joly's fourth visit in 2 years. She says she's there to signal Canada's steadfast support in the face of Russian aggression. That includes agreements on trade, security, and Ukraine's stolen children. You can hear more on that story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A bear cub that hobbled at least 16 kilometers on 3 legs from Ontario into Manitoba is now on the road to recovery. The injured black bear was first spotted last month in Ingolf, Ontario. The cub was spotted a few days later in Falcon Lake. The trek would have taken the animal across the rugged terrain of the Canadian Shield. It was eventually brought to Black Bear Rescue Manitoba. Owner Judy Stearns says the cub underwent surgery for a broken front leg and an open wound.
I feel fantastic. I mean, that's why we're doing what we're doing is to help cubs in need. And he was a cub that very much needed help. So it's even more rewarding.
Stearns says the cub weighed only about 20 pounds when he arrived and now tips the scales at a healthy 98. A familiar face will be in the audience at the 66th Grammy Awards on Sunday. Not Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, or Billie Eilish, but Winnipeg's own Amanda Boussy. Boussy got a taste of the limelight last month as a seat filler at the Emmy Awards, sitting in for celebrities when they need to step away from their seats. Well, now she's hit the jackpot again. Boussy is going to be a seat filler at the Grammys.
I'm so floored, and I'm so excited that I get to go to the Grammys. I'm also a singer, and my off time, just kind of for fun as a hobby, and music has always been really special to me, and so the Emmys was incredible, but I think this is, that much more special as well, just because it is music.
The Grammys will be handed out Sunday night at the Crypto Arena in Los Angeles. And celebrity Groundhog so far are in agreement today. Nova Scotia's Shubenacadie Sam, Pennsylvania's Punxsutawney Phil, Quebec's Fred Lamarmont, Wyerton Willie in Ontario, all of them predicting an early spring on this Groundhog Day. None saw a shadow, so no reason to hide. Manitoba Merv's prediction is expected in the next hour. And just a note, a federal agency in the U.S. last year took a look at the record of Punxsutawney Phil and set his weather accuracy rate at about 40%. So we'll see about that. Don't put a lot of stock in maybe what the rodents are saying today.
They fact-checked Phil. It's over.
Poor guy.
He's being laid off next month. It's his last report. I'm just kidding. All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Fun stat. Not fun for Phil, but fun stat. By the way, Manitoba Merv, we are waiting, as Heather mentioned. That's after 8. So Shanley Vidal, our community reporter, will be live from Okamic Marsh. Right now, let's go to Abby Adiyami with the forecast.
What I do know, it's clear outside and it's -3 degrees, and we're expecting to reach a high of 2 degrees. Thompson and Churchill going to a high of -3 later today. Fog advisory in effect for various regions, including Malita, Boissevain, Port de la Prairie, Morden, Winkler, Brandon, Dauphin, and Swan River. It's going to be foggy. It's going to be affecting your drive, so you need to take care out there. But Winnipeg is currently at -3 degrees.
All right, thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Speaking of fog, Corey.
Yeah, Eva called our commuter line, said she was driving just through Asheville, just before Dauphin, from Asheville to Dauphin there, and just said thick fog. She was going about 60 just to kind of stay safe. So be careful out there if you are in that area of the province. Very, very slow going. She was able to pick it up a little bit after that, but very, very thick fog in the Asheville going into Dauphin there. So be careful. If you see anything else going on out there, or don't see anything, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. She pulled over to give us a call, by the way, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
So wherever you're listening, in your car, in your home, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube this morning or listening on the app, thank you for tuning in. Next on the show, we've got a question for you. Can performing 2,000 push-ups in February help mental health? Well, the Canadian Mental Health Association is hoping so. That's why they're challenging Manitobans of all ages and abilities to push for better mental health through fitness this month. Over 500,000 participants have participated in this initiative for the past 7 years. It has raised worldwide $36 million for mental health. The goal of the challenge is to do 2,000 push-ups over 23 days. CBC's Jim Agapito couldn't resist. He visited a Winnipeg gym that's participating in this.
We are going to be doing the push-ups for our daily warm-up. Starting today is day 1 of 23 of the push-up challenge. There's about 15 of us. Every day we're going to be pushing together to raise awareness for mental health. Okay? So, as I always say, push that ground down like it's coming up on you, right? So, we're going to go with 15, take a couple of seconds of a break, 16, break, and then 18. Totaling what? That's 49, I sure hope. Yeah?
Hi, my name is Michelle Braithwaite, and I'm the owner of Big Mama's House of Pain.
You probably have the best name ever for any gym. What can people expect in that name?
Results. Fun family environment, fitness, and most importantly, community.
Push-up challenge is happening. Tell me how you're involved with this.
One of my coaches, Greg, he came to me probably about a month and a half ago and said, hey, Big Mama, what do you think of this? And it was funny because I had been looking at that prior and I thought to myself, I love push-ups and what more of a challenge than to do it. But then I thought, I'm already busy working with the challenge with my gym and how could I take on another one? So with Greg coming, what perfect opportunity. I said, buddy, you go ahead and do it. I give you permission to ask the BIMHOP people if they would like to be a part of the challenge. And he put it out there, talked to the members throughout the classes that he's coached and said, hey guys, let's do the 2,000 push-ups in 23 days. For mental health, we're going to raise awareness, we're going to raise funds and all of that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, it actually went really well. I think we have about 15 challengers so far, and today is day 1, and we're super excited to get pushing.
I don't expect you to do all 49 in a row, please. I really want you to go 15, pause, 16, pause, and then 18 pause. That way you get stronger together forever, okay? All right, so.
Push-ups. I mean, some people dread them, you love them. What is the reaction been like from some of your members?
They love it because they know that I push them to their max, and anything to do with a challenge, they're all over.
Ready, set, let's go. Good job. Back.
Okay, let's take a minute to rest. And this is to support mental health. You hear about the winter blues. How important was supporting something like that for your gym?
Very important. I myself get to see people day in and day out, and I get to see people's changes in attitudes shortly fall after Christmas. I get to see the weather, how it impacts and plays in people's mental health. So what way to spread awareness than to do push-ups? So we're actually pushing and we're raising awareness and money, and we're getting stronger together as a community.
Enough rest?
Are you guys ready to go? What do we have? 16. 16? All right, let's get it. Let's go.
Woo. You can do it.
Keep going, ladies.
Because when you work out, you relieve stress. And no matter what level you're at, if you are a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, there's always going to be a level for you to complete. So getting moving, that's what it comes down to. Get the body motion going, get up, get active. Happier you, happier everybody. Okay, let's get these. 18. Let's get 18 to total R.
18 of the best push-ups you've got.
When you do the challenge, 23 days, 2,000 push-ups, how many push-ups will you get them to do in a day, and how does it work?
You download the app, and the app kind of is very cool because it motivates you with every day with daily little quotes. It's not 100 push-ups a day, it's like 49 today. Tomorrow might be, say, 70. So you gradually will build up to that point, and then you'll have it maybe a day off or so, but then you get back at it again. It's like life, routine. The better you do it, the more consistency you get at it, the better you get. Way to get it, ladies and gentlemen. Sit, Maria. Keep going, girl.
Keep going.
Let's go, Shannon.
Could you show and explain to
Stacey.
people how to do a proper push-up? Because I think a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Absolutely, I sure can. And his name is Chris, and he's going to show us right here and now the modifications on how to do a push-up.
Hi, I'm Chris Mankasing. I'm a trainer here at BIMHOP. I actually am doing it because of mental health. That's how I got back into exercise. Easiest way is get down in a safe manner like this. Arms just to your side, feet up together if you can. If you're having trouble, you can open them a bit, and you're going to come down just like that. And another way to modify it is to have your knees on the ground. Makes it a little bit easier for you to pull this off. Okay, so you could do them this way. And then there's a final way, I'll show you on the wall here. Put your arms straight out in front of you. So feet back where you're comfortable. Bring it forward where your nose is just touching the wall, and then push away there, just like that.
Let's go. Push, 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 push. Hey!
I gotta ask, Big Mama's House of Pain, does she live up to that name?
100%. It's a very positive thing here, because no pain, no gain, right? That's a positive thing in life.
CBC's Jim Agapito out at a Winnipeg gym, Big Mama's House of Pain, as you heard. They are taking part in the Canadian Mental Health Association's Push-Up Challenge. And if you want more information about that specifically, you can go to thepushupchallenge.ca. It is right now 7:43 a.m. and if push-ups aren't your thing, but curling is, and that's how you like to get your exercise, then you know that part of the game is yelling on the ice. So Corey Funk is here to set up our prize pack. We had a bit of a contest running because CBC is a partnering sponsor of the Ironman Curling Bonds Bill, which is coming up in a few weeks. So what do we ask people to do?
Yes, we're asking people to give us your best hurry hard out there. So we put the shout out, and the prize pack you get is a toque, which I'm wearing right now, and a tote bag, a bunch of other lovely CBC swag. And we got these two calls.
Hi, this is Mary Swain, and my favorite curling loud noise is sleep, sleep, hurry, hurry. I only curled once in grade 11, and actually I won a trophy, so I was so excited. I didn't really know what I was doing, but we won.
Hi, my name is Holly Rafferty, and I curl at Niverville, Manitoba. We have natural ice, and we work hard to be able to have our ice start in early January, but we still only ended up with 4 games. Anyways, I'm looking forward to getting back on that ice as soon as possible before spring or warm weather is the end of our ice in Niverville. Here's my call when that rock needs some more. Come on, get on! Hurry, hurry, hurry hard!
That's a special. The hurry hard has a whole new meaning when it's outdoor.
No
ice.
kidding. Get over the bump.
Yeah, exactly. Congrats to both Holly and Mary for your hurry hard. You both are winners of that CBC tote bag. And of course, this is also in promotion of the Ironman curling tournament happening, well, hopefully outdoors in the coming weeks or so. So thanks for those calls. Thanks for your hurry hards. And you can keep the calls coming. We do like to hear them. 204-788-3205. Might not win a prize pack, but we might play them still.
Yeah,
it's
that's
fun.
it for our prize packs. So
yeah,
congrats
exactly.
to all of our winners. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
-3 in Winnipeg, clear. Freezing fog in Brandon, -2. Dauphin is, Thompson is cloudy, and it is -4. And we have had calls about the fog, especially in Westman, 788-3093. Different phone number to call. That is our commuter line. Next on the show, The lawyer representing the family of a man killed by police hopes that the impending inquest can address racial blind spots in policing. 5 years ago, Machwar Madut was killed by Winnipeg police, and while an IIU investigation cleared the officers involved, his family is still waiting for this. It's been 5 years. Last week in a CBC exclusive, we heard from his ex-wife, Akuliak Dang, about how the wait for an inquest has impacted her and her 3 kids.
To be in the dark for 5 years is hard for a kid to move on with life, like schooling and other chores of life to do. Even right now, I'm talking to you, some are having difficulties of choosing different things to do in life. There's something dragging them behind. If you don't know the truth about what you're living for, your own dad is being killed, and 5 years later, you still don't have answer to it. So when is the life going to be better for you, for me? I went there for inquest time 2021. I was there 2022. They told us that until we find a medical document, we'll resume the inquest so that we can give you the detail. Until now, we're waiting for that. Where we were from, there was always gunshot. Every time you're running for your life. Okay, where's the better life that we were here for? Where that effort we came for? Protection. And we are here trying to fight for our life. Tomorrow, what are we going to be? Our men as Sudanese or African, we are always fear about our men being killed. We are facing a hardship in a land that is meant to be for safety. Pardon me if I say speaking negative, but this is how I feel. I want to fight for justice for my husband and for my kids too. They need to know what happened to their dad so that they can move on with life, knowing the truth about what went down 5 years ago.
Zilla Jones is representing the family in the inquest. She has worked on other inquests in the past, and she has some updates to be shared next on the program. I spoke with her yesterday.
Good morning.
So what updates have you had about this inquest?
Well, I just had a meeting yesterday about it, and all parties are going to be having a pretrial, I think at the beginning of April, and that should then put us in a position to be able to set dates for the inquest. So right now, I think it's just a matter of finalizing the witness list of who is going to be called and trying to narrow the issues to what needs to be addressed. So there's new inquest counsel, and he is just going through the files and getting that set up.
If you meet in April with the hope of setting dates, do you have, in your experience, any sense of whether that could mean that the dates would be later this year, or that is still too early to say?
I think it's too early to say. I think the question is how long do we need, because often inquests will be 3-4 weeks long, and the problem is it's really difficult to get that much court time. So there's perhaps an option to break them up into 1-week segments. I haven't had a chance to really consider that yet. And ultimately, it's the court's call whether they're even willing to do that.
What were your other takeaways from the meeting in terms of, did you leave satisfied, feeling there was progress that maybe you hadn't had up to this time?
I definitely feel there's progress. I think that all parties are agreed that it's really important that this get a full hearing, and that it's really important that people be able to ask the questions about use of force in policing and how that might intersect with mental health. And I would say that there's still certain things that maybe need to be resolved still.
Can you share any of the details of from your perspective, what those are?
Well, not at this point, because I guess it's a off-the-record meeting where counsel are trying to be candid with each other. I also haven't had a chance to speak with the client about some of the decisions that she may have to make.
Understood. So let me widen out here. What are some of the biggest challenges with this particular inquest that you've been faced with to this point?
Well, I think the delays are a big challenge. I think also the justice system hasn't really had capacity or language to address the issues that we're raising, which is the relationship between police and Black people, and not just Black people, but Black refugee, non-English speaking, traumatized people who have mental health concerns, and what is the relationship between them and Winnipeg Police, and also all the other services that are offered, because I'm not sure that the newcomer settler services were adequate for this family. There's a whole bunch of interlocking pieces of how society treats these issues and how we deal with them. I don't know that the Winnipeg justice system has really dealt with these in an appropriate way before. generally police are given a lot more latitude on use of force than I believe is appropriate, for one thing. So you're always dealing with, they can do that because the case law says that they can use that kind of force. And I think that needs revising.
You're talking about really looking holistically at this, which would widen the lens of what we've had as precedent for looking at cases like this. Are there other jurisdictions legally that are doing a better job at that you're hoping this inquest, or are you breaking new ground here?
I think we'd be breaking new ground because I think generally police have been given like a fair bit of latitude to use force. And I think, obviously they need some, but I do think it needs to be revised in light of what we now know about implicit bias, about what we know about mental health. And as I was saying yesterday in a meeting, that we're talking human life here. And maybe there's a different way that police need to de-escalate. So, for example, can they just walk away from a situation? I know they'll say, well, we have to arrest this person now. Well, do you? So what's more important, preserving their life or putting them in handcuffs right this second? Maybe you need to leave for an hour. Or there's different ways that we can articulate that. But I do think that it needs revising in light of perhaps different values now and less willingness to give authority to people in a blanket sense, like blanket authority. We need to perhaps tailor that authority a little bit.
So I know your meeting yesterday didn't involve all of the lawyers in this case, but why are there so many lawyers involved with this inquest?
There's inquest counsel, so that's the person who calls the inquest, calls the witnesses, sort of puts everything together, and then there's myself representing Ms. Yak, and then there is counsel for a number of social organizations. And then there's also counsel for the Winnipeg Police Service, and I believe there's counsel for Shared Health.
Now, inquests are meant to discover, as we mentioned, more about what happened and not to determine guilt.
Correct.
Can you elaborate on why to you it is important that race is a focal point in this inquest?
That is front and center for my clients in her community, and that's the one piece that I don't think the other parties are fully grasping, perhaps. And it is the focal point just because we see the statistics. We see that Black people are overrepresented in police shootings across Canada and across the United States. It's difficult to get this information because they don't keep the greatest statistics, but from what we do know, there's definitely a disproportionate impact on Black and as well as Indigenous people for police shootings. And we know that there are issues of racial profiling of Black Canadians in many jurisdictions in Canada. I don't think Manitoba's done a comprehensive study on that, but everything would suggest that we have the same problems here with carding or racial profiling, which often can then lead to negative encounters. And we know that there's a lot of mistrust between the Black community in Winnipeg and police. Many people don't feel comfortable with police. I hear the stories all the time about people that have been pulled over when they shouldn't have been, they've been questioned when they shouldn't have been. So there's certainly a need to address that gap and to hear those concerns and do something about them.
What can you share with us about some of the delays up to this point?
There was some difficulty in getting some of the medical information. We do have it now. There's health privacy laws and different considerations around that.
Is that in part because I understand he lived in multiple provinces as well?
Yeah, that was part of it because there was a request for Alberta records, for example. So that was part of the challenge. And just so they go back a number of years.
Got it. Financial aspects of the inquest have been a challenge. What's meant by that?
So I guess what the finance part of this is that the government of Manitoba is not paying for legal fees for Ms. Akolyak, for the family members of Mr. Madut. So they do have the ability to do that. It is discretionary. So you can apply and ask them to cover legal fees so that a party in an inquest can have representation, and the government can decide if they're going to do that or not. And in this case, they said they are not. And the reason they gave was that they believe that the inquest counsel can properly represent her interests. She vehemently disagrees with that. As I had just said, race is an important part of this inquest, and she doesn't believe that inquest counsel would, not that they're not great counsel, not that they're not a great person, but she doesn't believe, and I'm not saying what I believe, but she doesn't believe that they would be able to bring that aspect forward, and she doesn't feel comfortable discussing it or addressing it with that counsel. She feels comfortable addressing it with her own counsel, who is familiar with the Black community, belongs to the Black community, and has a history of dealing with these issues. So that's really important to her, and they denied her that counsel. So they're essentially saying that she would have to pay for it herself for her community. And I find that to be unconscionable because this is somebody that the state murdered, her husband. The least they can do is cover her legal counsel to address some of the trauma that she's experiencing from that and that her children are experiencing. And it's not a lot to ask to let her have somebody that can help her speak and put her voice forward.
And we should also mention that your work is pro bono on this.
That's correct. At this point it is.
Yeah.
And I've committed to her that I will assist her no matter what, and that's not going to change. So if it ends up being pro bono, then it ends up being pro bono. But I can't help but see the irony in this, that, the police have a lawyer, the government has a lawyer, everybody has a lawyer, and the Black people don't have a lawyer. And they're expecting me to give my labor for free, which I am doing, but I don't think that's right that the government condones that happening. It's just a testament to how little they value, I guess, the experiences and the labor of Black women, that they aren't willing to cover that.
You said at the beginning of this that we still, while we have that April date now, we still don't know how long this is going to take.
Right.
How can lengthy delays impair inquests, Zilla?
Well, I think one big thing is that people's memories fade with time. So as you probably know, it's easier to remember something from a year ago than 5 years ago. Like, how many of us remember anything pre-COVID at this point, right? So a lot happens, and stress and trauma take their toll, and then people can't remember things. There might be people you can't even find, like, say, people that perhaps are living in that apartment. It's a more transient population, so it may be that when they're coming to serve people subpoenas, they've moved, they're not in the country anymore, they're living somewhere else. I understand that may be the case already with some of the witnesses, that they've left the country and they're not going to come back. So that's a big part. Obviously, the impact on the family, as you heard, is a lot, and with delay, it's very stressful for them. It's a lot of uncertainty. They're not able to have their closure and move on. The inquest doesn't blame anybody, but it does give some insight into what happened. It does make some suggestions as to how things can be better going forward. Unfortunately, we've had another death that happened recently that perhaps may not have happened if the inquest had happened and the recommendations were made and changes have been made. So potentially other people lose their lives because these issues haven't been brought forward. So, I mean, there's a lot of damage that can be done by delay.
Thank you very much for the update and the insight. Appreciate your time. We'll talk again.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Winnipeg lawyer Zilla Jones, I spoke with her yesterday. She is representing the family of Machwar Madut in the upcoming inquest into his 2019 death. Now, we did reach out to the province for an update on the progress of the Madut inquest. They confirmed that the inquest process has begun. I'm Marcy Marcusa, 2 minutes to 8. Heather Wells back with headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg man who was taken to Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre after a car crash 2 weeks ago says he left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas alleges he was beaten by hospital security guards. And for the second time in less than a month, the Winnipegger is going to be rubbing elbows with some of the biggest stars in showbiz. Amanda Boosie will be a seat filler at Sunday's Grammy Awards. She knows what to do. She was also a seat filler at the Emmy Awards last month in Los Angeles. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Clear, -3 in the city. Our high today is going to be 3 above 0 in Winnipeg. Fog to the west. Take it easy. And coming up, we are going to touch base with Shanley Vidal, who is our community reporter. It's Groundhog Day. We're going live to Okamic Marsh. We'll find out if Manitoba MERV is predicting an early spring. In addition, we're going to have a conversation with a Winnipeg City Councillor who says he eventually wants to see the new community connection space moved out of the Millennium Library downtown. We'll find out why. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The Irish singer Bob Geldof is the guy behind the charity single Do They Know It's Christmas and the massive concert Live Aid for famine relief in 1985. Bob will look back on his charity shows and he'll tell you why life after Live Aid wasn't an easy adjustment.
And I needed to pause to take this in, the enormity of this thing.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
Since the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, where over 1,000 garment workers died, the CBC's Fifth Estate has found that not enough has been done to improve work conditions, including by Canadian companies. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm John Northcott. We begin with the Canadian Air Force's maritime helicopters, the fleet of Cyclones plagued with problems. We've told you how 2 decades after the helicopters were ordered, some still have not been delivered, how the cost of owning and operating them has ballooned by another $1 billion, and how concerning cracks have been reported in the tails of some helicopters. Now the CBC's Murray Brewster has a report that shows a defect in the Cyclone's main rotor blades is forcing technicians to perform more inspections.
After looking at a copy of an internal airworthiness document, this is the reaction from Defence Minister Bill Blair.
I think my first priority is making sure that the men and women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces can do their job safely, and that the equipment that we send them out to do the important job that they do is fit for purpose.
CBC News obtained a copy of the Air Force Risk Management Report. It shows the U.S. manufacturer Sikorsky warned Canada in June 2022 about a potential issue with some of the Cyclone's main rotor blades, defects that could cause the blades to come apart in flight. Subsequent testing has discovered 4 defective blades. More testing is being done on 7 others. None of the Cyclone blades have failed in flight. Blair says the Defense Department has a plan and is confident in the Cyclones.
I rely on the advice we receive from D&D and from CAV, the people that operate them and also those who are responsible for their maintenance and procurement.
In the meantime, the Cyclone blades will have to be inspected every 50 hours. Jeremiah Gertler, a U.S. military aviation analyst, says it's a disruption.
They should be concerned about this because with the more frequent inspections, it's possible that they'll be able to use the Cyclones less. They'll spend less time in the air and more time getting checked out.
The defective blades are being returned to the manufacturer. It is, however, part of a growing list of concerns about the Cyclone, including cracked tail rotors and a combat system that the Air Force is scrambling to replace. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly is in Ukraine.
Canada is a proud friend of Ukraine, and we have stood firm with Ukrainians as they're fighting.
Joly met with her Ukrainian counterpart this morning. The statement says they were negotiating a Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement and discussing long-term security commitments. Joly will also take part in efforts to address the unlawful transportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. This is her 4th trip to Ukraine since the beginning of 2022. Senior Palestinian officials say the U.S. isn't doing enough to punish violent Israeli settlers. Some human rights groups have been calling attention to a surge in violence in the occupied West Bank. They characterize the sometimes fatal attacks on Palestinian civilians as revenge killings. CBC's Chris Brown reports.
Just as the U.S. president was announcing new sanctions against Israeli settlers, CBC News was sitting down for an interview with Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh.
It's not enough. What we need to see from the United States is really put sanctions on settlement products, not to allow Israel to continue with this colonization program.
He means not to buy or trade goods and services produced by settlers on occupied Palestinian land. The U.S. sanctions named 4 individuals accused of leading rampages against Palestinian businesses, attacking farmers, and trying to drive civilians out of their communities. They and others targeted by the U.S. measures will have their financial assets frozen, along with other penalties.
The settlement is a total destruction of 2-state solution, and settlement construction is an erosion of the future Palestinian state.
Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the sanctions. He says Israel acts against all violators of the law and the U.S. measures are unnecessary. Canada's government has not announced any measures against violent settlers. Since October the 7th, almost 27,000 people in Gaza have been killed by Israel's military campaign, as well as 372 Palestinians in the West Bank by settlers and the military. Qatari officials who are trying to broker a ceasefire have indicated Israel and Hamas are close to a deal, but obstacles remain. Chris Brown, CBC News, Ramallah.
Police are investigating after shots were fired into the house of a BC Khalistan activist. It happened overnight Thursday in Surrey, BC. Muninder Singh is with the BC Gurdwaras Council. He identifies the owner of the house as Samarjit Singh.
Up to 20-plus shots fired into his home, including up to about 2 feet away from his 6-year-old that was sleeping upstairs and went right by his bed. It was quite a horrifying scene for him.
No injuries were reported. Singh says the owner of the home was a close friend of murdered Surrey Temple leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The RCMP says this was an isolated incident. The public inquiry into foreign interference is set to hear from its first ministerial witness next hour. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc's testimony is important because this week's proceedings are focused on how much information the federal government will allow to be made public. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, we got a bit of a preview of the government's position yesterday.
Sure did. John, the mandate for this inquiry was to make as much information public as possible. But yesterday, we were shown a letter that government lawyers wrote to the Commission warning that beyond national security interests, there are also practical limits on what information can be cleared for release. We were shown an initial batch of 13 relatively short documents that apparently took 200 person hours to review and redact. We were cautioned that that is time away from the important work that intelligence officers otherwise need to be doing. At one point, the head of Canada's intelligence agency, CSIS, said that, well, you know what? Spying's not something you do in public.
So the purpose of CSIS is to have secrets, which is different than transparency.
David Vigneault there, managing expectations, sure. But as the day went on, a lawyer that was representing media organizations also asked the senior security officials to confirm that they wouldn't be protecting information simply to prevent embarrassment or conceal inefficiencies, errors, problems in their conduct. Final decisions on what's released often come down to the politicians of the day. So that's why this week of witnesses concludes with Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc.
Okay, Janice, as we watched that, before the hearing began, the Commission asked the government for documents related to foreign interference by India. Now, that's prompted more groups to ask for standing at this inquiry.
That's right. 3 prominent Canadian Sikh organizations announced yesterday they've written seeking standing when it gets to its factual phase in March. In their letter, they argue that part of their advocacy includes engaging their communities in the Canadian political process, but that has led to targeting by the government of India, with diaspora groups from Ukraine, for example, the Chinese minority communities already very active at the inquiry. The absence of Sikh representation, they say, would be unacceptable.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Ontario is expecting a ruling from the country's highest court today on a bid by Premier Doug Ford's government to keep its marching orders to cabinet ministers confidential. The Supreme Court of Canada will rule on a case sparked by the CBC's request under the province's Freedom of Information laws. They involve mandate letters written to ministers after Ford won the 2018 election. The request was denied by the government on the basis that releasing the documents would reveal the substance of cabinet deliberations. The Information and Privacy Commissioner, though, disagreed, ordering the government to disclose them. 2 levels of Ontario courts have also sided with the CBC. Some athletes in Nunavut are worried they'll have to miss this year's Arctic Winter Games. Alaska hosting the event in March, but with the Games only 5 weeks away, dozens of athletes still don't have passports. Nick Murray reports.
Nunavut has nearly 300 athletes ready to compete in Alaska in March, but a quarter of them might not make it.
Nunavut athletes who earned their spot.
Nunavut MP Lori Edelhout raised the issue in the House of Commons this week. She says part of the problem is Nunavut only has 3 Service Canada centres, none that process passport applications.
Families are now forced to pay thousands of dollars to fly down south to get their passports expedited or not compete at all.
Edelhout tells CBC News that her staff was helping athletes by having passport applications mailed to her office. Staff would then go line up at Service Canada to hand deliver it, but she says in November, Service Canada red flagged her office and barred her staff from bringing applications in person.
Another huge barrier from Service Canada is the correspondence are sent in English and French only, so there are many Inuit that don't read either of those languages.
If they can't go because they can't get a passport in time, that's very disappointing for them.
Marilla Deputer is Team Nunavut's chef de mission. She echoed the concerns over language barriers, saying some applications were sent back for minor errors.
Or they've had issues getting the photo ID or the birth certificates in the first place to even be able to apply.
In a statement, the Office for Citizen Services Minister Terry Beach says they're aware of the challenges and aim to process mail-in applications in 20 days. Nick Murray, CBC News, Iqaluit.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca, including this hour, the latest on the Groundhog prognostications for an early spring. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, your morning show on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on your CBC Listen app or on YouTube. Lots of ways to tune in. We've had a fun morning so far here this Friday. Been a really connected show. In this half hour, we're going to continue that. So first of all, what does Manitoba Merv have to say on this Groundhog Day? We're going to take you live to Okamic Marsh to find out whether Manitoba Merv is predicting the early spring or not. So Shanley Vidal will be there. Well, she is there right now. And you can watch all this on YouTube while you're listening as well if you're in a spot where you can engage in both ways. In addition, we're going to have a conversation this half hour with a Winnipeg City Councillor who says he would eventually like to see the new community connection space moved out of the Millennium Library downtown to a different location. And we're going to ask him why. So that's coming up in this half hour of the show. So Evan Duncan is going to be our guest, and he also, by the way, is head of Council's Community Services Committee. So we'll explore more about what his concerns are. Stay tuned. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other news.
Good morning. A Winnipeg man who was in a car crash and taken to the Health Sciences Centre for treatment 2 weeks ago left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas says he was beaten by HSC security guards. And the man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million of meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. He appeared in court in Brandon yesterday and has to pay $140,000 in bail, as well as wearing a GPS tracker and adhere to a curfew. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
To the forecast now with Abby Adiemi.
-3 and clear skies. We're expecting a mix of sun and cloud today, and we're looking at a high of 2 degrees. Fog advisory in effect for various regions, including Melita, Boissevain, Port La Prairie, Morden, Winkler, Brandon, Dauphin, and Swan River. So you need to take it easy out there. Exercise caution on the roads during this foggy period.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Speaking of which, Corey's in with a commute.
Yeah, very foggy still in western Manitoba. Thomas just called really bad, thick fog. Highway 16, he was driving from Strathcona to Minnedosa. And you notice actually ice building up on the car by the time he actually got to where he was. So just look out for that. Very, very thick fog, western Manitoba today. Here in the city, Jake says he was biking down McPhillips, hit about 10 potholes. So look out for that. May disrupt your commute down McPhillips. And Paul called northbound Osborne. Right in the village there, there's a flatbed truck taking up the curb lane. And folks, though, good news, are zipper merging to kind of get around that. Traffic is still flowing as quick as it can through the village there. If you see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
It is 8:13 a.m. and it is February 2nd when all of our eyes are on large rodents. Love it or loathe it, it's Groundhog Day, folks. We're looking to the groundhogs for guidance and for amusement. Will we have 6 more weeks of winter, or are we in for an early spring? As I mentioned, CBC Manitoba's community reporter, Shanley Vidal, is live right now at Okamic Marsh, which is the home of puppet Manitoba Merv. Good morning, Shanley.
Good morning, Marcy. And Manitoba Merv has emerged from his hiding spot, actually wearing a construction hat and a tool belt in front of a little construction sign. And we'll find out more about that. But of course, the sun is shining, and it is, of course, Groundhog Day, also World Wetlands Day. And I am joined by Natalie Bays, who is the manager of operations for Okamic Marsh Wetland Discovery Center. Hello, Natalie.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having us.
So just a few minutes ago, Merv did emerge. What happened?
Well, given the beautiful sunny morning, Merv did see his shadow, which does mean 6 more weeks of winter. So don't put your shovels away. But the good news is we live in Manitoba, so 6 more weeks of winter is about average for us. So, that's the good news.
Did that surprise you?
Given the forecast for today, it was a little bit of a surprise. They were predicting lots of cloud cover, but this beautiful sunshine, it's inevitable. Nice shadow was seen.
Now, Merv has been predicting, spring, and are we going to have more of it or less of it since the 1990s. Now, how accurate are Merv's predictions?
Well, Merv's predictions, depends who you ask. According to us, over 90% accurate. But the Weather Channel just posted this morning that he is indeed the most accurate groundhog we have at 73%. That was their percentage rate officially.
And look, Merv is a puppet now, but he's not just any puppet groundhog. He's dressed up today. He has a construction hat. He had a little screwdriver that he threw as he emerged, because I think maybe he was
startled. He was startled by a shadow.
Got the tool belt on. There's a tool in there. Why is Merv wearing the construction attire?
Well, the Wetland Discovery Center is currently closed for renovations, so we've got a big, exciting project underway. The building is 30 years old, and we have never had any major renovations done at all. And a 30-year-old building, after a while, the systems start to deteriorate, and this gives us opened up the opportunity for brand new exhibits. And updated cafe and meeting rooms, etc. So it's exciting news for us, and also something even newer is on the second floor of what's currently the Ducks Unlimited Canada offices. We will be opening a multi-purpose space as well, so we'll have more space.
Look forward to checking that out when it opens. Now, today is Groundhog Day, but it's also World Wetlands Day. What does that mean to you?
Oh, it means so much. The theme for World Wetlands Day is human health and well-being. And so we at Okamic Marsh and at Ducks Unlimited Canada, we work to conserve wetlands, but we want people to go out and enjoy them. So, lots of studies have shown that people, when they get out in nature, it reduces anxiety, it reduces stress. So we just want to encourage everyone to go out. Ducks Unlimited is having a contest where they want people to share their stories about why they like wetlands, what they like to do in wetlands, and then you win a Yeti prize pack. But we are one of the internationally recognized wetlands according to Ramsar. So it's a wonderful place to be. We're very lucky.
And you have some special programming happening, I understand.
We do right now, even though the Wetland Discovery Center is closed, we do have programming in an adjacent building called our Willow Retreat, and we are doing Voyager programs with the students. So we're busy every day with the school buses, which is great. And coming up, I think next weekend is Voyager Days for the public as well. So we're inviting the public to come out and make some bannock with us, play some Voyager games, and get outside.
Now, Natalie, before we let you go, I have to ask. What does Merv do for the other 364 days of the year? Where does he go?
Oh, he hangs out with us at the Wetland Discovery Center, oversees what we do. He's a bit of an introvert, so he doesn't come out too much. But he hangs out with us. The building was built 30 years ago, and when he saw that from his little burrow, he came on over and wanted to learn more and partner with us and share his weather predicting skills.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you very much.
Natalie Bays is Manager of Operations for the Okamic Marsh Wetland Discovery Center. And of course, if you missed it, the puppet Merv did see his shadow. Back to you, Marcy.
Watching that on YouTube as I was, they looked a little chilly out there, right? So I think the wind is kind of making it feel a little bit chillier than the temperature we've got out there this morning. But Shanley out live with the news from Okamic Marsh this morning, speaking there with the organizers on site. So Okamic Marsh is out in Stonewall. Today is Groundhog Day. It's also World Wetlands Day. Now, while she did mention Shanley and describe what Merv saw, and he's predicting more winter, we actually have the official call that we captured from Jacques Bourgeois from Okamic.
Looks like the sun is rising, so Manitoba Merv, you can make your appearance, and let's see what we have. Oh, he's coming out. He is coming out. He is wearing some tools because we are under construction right now.
Here's the announcement.
And he dropped his screwdrivers. That means we have a shadow. He's all sad that we have 6 more weeks of winter in Manitoba. So very sorry, Manitobans. Don't put the shovels away just yet. We have another 6 more weeks of winter in the prairies, which takes us to mid-March, which is not too bad. So make sure you keep your warm jackets on because we have a few more cold days ahead of us. Today is also World Wetlands Day, so Merv is very happy to celebrate with us. So congratulations, Merv, for your prediction. Thank you so much. 6 more weeks of winter in Manitoba.
Boo. Jacques Bourgeois out at Okanagan making the official announcement. By the way, Manitoba Merv is bucking the trend of other groundhogs who popped out on this February 2nd. Earlier today, we heard that groundhogs elsewhere are calling for an early spring. It is 8:20 right now, and as I alluded to at the top of the clock, a Winnipeg City Councillor says he would eventually like to see the new Community Connection space moved out of the Millennium Library downtown to a different location. Evan Duncan is the councillor for Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood, and the head of the City Council's Community Services Committee, and joins us more to talk about it. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what's the thinking behind this? What concerns you about having it in the library?
Well, there's several issues around it. One of which is at the forefront here is that the City of Winnipeg's jurisdiction is not with social services. Unfortunately, that is a provincial responsibility, and the folks at the Millennium Library and the Community Connection Space have been doing a great job at picking up the slack there. Obviously, several contributing factors through COVID and whatnot have just seen an increase to the need in Winnipeg and Manitoba, and they're doing some of that work. However, there are provincial spaces, whether it be an EA office, mental health services at HSC, homeless shelters throughout the downtown and surrounding areas, that all do this work as well. And I think it's about time that the provincial government look at bringing these all together and providing a hub of their own in downtown Winnipeg.
This is bucking a trend across the country. There's so much talk about libraries being a critical piece of social fabric and serving communities and widening our lens of thinking about libraries not as spaces to just come in and out and get books, but it's such a critical thing. And because it has had success downtown, I'm wondering what your thinking is beyond the jurisdictional issues about why not continue to support it being there?
Well, there's been several issues that have come with this as well. Just to be straight up as possible with people, full transparency is that we've seen numbers at the Millennium Library over the last recent months and years gone down, actually. We have a report out now that shows that we lost up to 30,000 visitors. Whether or not that's to do with individuals who are there who potentially might be experiencing some sort of crisis, whether it be mental health, addictions, or just looking for a service, I don't know those numbers at this point in time, but there's the argument around whether metal detectors are not or should be there. So that leads me to the safety piece. And reports have been out that show that there's people who have had knives taken away, scissors taken away, in one case, bullets taken away. That to me would not sound to give any confidence to people that it's safe down there. So again, coming back to the folks that are looking for these services, I've said it once and I'll say it again. I don't think it's appropriate to have these people paraded through a public space like the Millennium Library when we could look at alternative spaces where they could have their decency and dignity to go and ask for a hand up in life, because people are there. I've worked with these people in my past work life as well, and we need to give these services. Whether or not the Millennium Library is the appropriate place for it, that's where I question.
So one of your perspectives that you're putting out there is that you have concern that it's a public space in that way, and so to protect people's public health information if they're coming in for services, that's not a library to you is not a space that should be doing that.
No, and the report that is going to be coming to the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services speaks to also the library returning to more of a traditional service there as well, and giving the librarians an opportunity to provide those services to people. So again, it comes back to if we need this service, which I totally agree we do, let's look at an appropriate place on all angles.
Why? I know that we had some stats out this week. We reported the Millennium Library seeing a drop actually in security incidents from 264 in 2022 down to 187 in 2023. But why tie the security issues that have been happening at the library to people coming in for help for other social services or other supports for their mental health? Because that sounds like you're saying that the people coming in for that mental support, or potentially for mental health support, which is one of the examples,
right,
are the ones that are perpetrating issues with security.
Right, and the mental health piece, is a wide spectrum of needs when it comes to mental health. But at the end of the day, when we have individuals who are there who are in mental health crisis potentially due to addictions, and I listened to a man that's well respected, Mitch Bouvier in Winnipeg, and around this whole meth seizure, is that when people are suffering from addictions and in a mental health crisis, they are unstable and very frequently very unsafe. So again, we need a location, potentially in downtown Winnipeg, led by the provincial government, that is creating this hub of service for these people. I appreciate the work that's been going on at the Millennium Library. I appreciate the advocacy around it. However, the Millennium Library has been a place that should be for library services and library-related services.
Overall, just to return to my first point, I'm curious how you feel about libraries and their picture in being, because they are used by a wide swath of the community. And that library has been established as being a place where people who are in that community can come. How do you see a library's place in community then and into the conversation around social service? Like, are you wanting it to go back to strictly book lending? I'm just wondering.
No, it's not just book lending. There's lots of wonderful programs that are also being run out of Millennium Library. There's the traditional library services. If I get into this, this is what a librarian should and shouldn't be doing, that's not really my role. But the librarians have spoke up as well. They have went to the union and said they have a safety concern there. So this is not coming from me. This is coming from the folks that are working the front line. I know that there are also librarians that appreciate the work that they can do over and above their duties that blend into that social services realm. But at the end of the day, Winnipeggers are saying that they would like their libraries to be for traditional uses. And then let's build on that with programming as well. Let's build on that with technology, and let's continue to make a welcoming space. However, for the social services end of thing, that should not be led by the City of Winnipeg. So
what you're saying then is, has the city been in conversation with librarians and the staff at the Millennium Library specifically, and they're telling you they want out? Are you following their lead on this? They want out of the social services hub?
There was a grievance filed through QP around safety at the Millennium Library by their staff, yeah.
But that grievance, how far back does that go? I'm just curious. Is that something new, or is that what you were looking at before we started looking at security measures?
That was around that time when the major issue that happened there and the incident that led to that death. There was a grievance filed at that point in time.
You're suggesting that this could also still live downtown, that maybe that's a social services hub. Why would you say that?
Because there's a need downtown. There's a need that people are suffering on several different spectrums there, and that we need to support these folks again. But the City of Winnipeg can't do it on their own. It's just not possible. This is jurisdiction for the provincial government, and we have a great working relationship with this new government, and I think that we're going to have a lot of great items coming out of their budget here in the spring, and I hope that the social services end of things is addressed and strengthened.
Anything to add that I haven't asked you about?
I don't think so at this point in time. I appreciate you having me on, though.
Thank you very much, Evan Duncan, for being with us today.
Okay, take care of yourself.
That is Evan Duncan, Winnipeg City Councillor for Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood, also the head of the City Council's Community Services Committee, and speaking to us this morning on Developing News. He's saying the social services hub in the Millennium Library, he believes, should be moved to a different location, and he's citing jurisdictional issues, traditional jurisdictional issues, I guess, over services, social services and mental health services, for example, and saying he wants the province to take on a bigger role. What do you think of this? Obviously, there's more folks that will have perspective on this, and we will reach out to them throughout the day. But please weigh in at 788-3205.
Nothing can stop an Iron Man from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
Coming up to 8:30 now in Winnipeg, and we have had not fog here, but a lot of fog causing issue in parts of Westman. So there's an advisory that has not been stopped yet, so it's still ongoing. So this could be affecting you. Often when it's a fog advisory, it ends later in the morning. So we'll see what happens. But right now it's still issued for Portage la Prairie, Morden, Winkler, Brandon, Neepawa, Killarney, Verdon, Dauphin, Minnedosa, as well through Swan River and Duck Mountain. So this is heavy, thick fog, and I know we did hear that from some folks this morning that it was really thick up around the Dauphin area. We got some calls. 788-3093. We're late in the morning drive, but please still reach out if you do need to for safety, if you have to pass something along. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 11:30, it is still -3 and sunny out there. We're headed to a beautiful day again, if you don't mind the mild weather. A high today of 2, although it will become windy this afternoon. A Winnipeg man who was taken to the Health Sciences Centre after a car crash 2 weeks ago says he left with even more injuries. Bobby Thomas alleges he was beaten by hospital security guards. Thomas says it happened while he was leaving the emergency department after waiting more than 8 hours for care. He says one of the nurses told him not to leave.
I was then put in a position where I felt like I needed to record myself, as I thought I was being belittled for making my own choice to want to leave to go get medical help somewhere else.
He says security followed him while he was trying to leave. Thomas says one security guard pushed him into the door. Then he says 5 guards piled on him, smashing his head into the concrete ground. He suffered a fractured cheekbone and nerve damage. Shared Health says HSC is reviewing the incident and reviewing its security training. The man accused of trying to smuggle $50 million of meth across the Canadian border is out on bail. Kamalpreet Sidhu appeared in court in Brandon yesterday. The semi-trailer he was driving was on its way from California to Winnipeg on January 14th when it was searched at the border near Boissevain. He is charged with importing and possessing a controlled substance for trafficking. Bail was set at $140,000. He also has to wear a GPS tracker and adhere to a curfew. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly is on a surprise visit to Ukraine, where, among other things, she's announcing a new initiative aimed at bringing Ukrainian children back home from Russia. Since the start of the war, the Kremlin has abducted close to 20,000 children. Joly says Canada will use its global diplomatic network to bring pressure to bear on Russia.
We will talk to many, many countries of the world. We will raise awareness regarding this issue. We will convene many countries to talk about it. And of course, yes, we will work with countries that have direct relations with Russia to make sure that these children come back home.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is facing an outstanding arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court related to the abducted children. The Fairmont in Winnipeg is back under familiar ownership. Lombard Hospitality Limited is a subsidiary of James Richardson and Sons. It has announced it has acquired the hotel and will once again form part of the JRSL Richardson Centre at Portage in Maine. Now, that hotel was originally developed and owned by the Richardsons, but was sold in 2000. The hotel will continue to operate under the Fairmont brand, and all employees have been offered continued employment at the hotel. A bear cub that entered Manitoba on 3 legs is now walking on all 4s. The cub was first spotted in Ingolf, Ontario last month. He was hobbling on a broken front leg with an open wound. He was seen again several days later in Falcon Lake, a journey of about 16 kilometers across rugged Canadian Shield. The cub ended up at Black Bear Rescue Manitoba. Owner Judy Stern says he's recovering well after surgery.
He was very stressed looking when he arrived. He would have been in great pain on top of everything else. So he's doing so much better.
Stern says the cub, nicknamed Ace, weighed about 20 pounds when they got him. He now weighs a healthy 98 pounds. It's expected he'll be returned to the wild later this year. For the second time in less than a month, the Winnipegger is going to be rubbing elbows with some of the biggest stars in showbiz. Amanda Buzzi will be a seat filler at Sunday's Grammy Awards. Now, she was also a seat filler at the Emmys last month in Los Angeles, and she's excited about seeing her favorite singers perform.
Billie Eilish will be performing, and I'm really excited to see her perform. As well as Joni Mitchell. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited hopefully to sit next to Taylor Swift, maybe, Harry Styles, anyone at all. I will be completely thrilled.
She was one of 350 applicants selected from 30,000 to fill seats at the Grammys. And just a recap on this Groundhog Day, Manitoba Merv is going against the flow. Every single groundhog forecaster in Eastern Canada and in the U.S. all predict an early spring. None saw their shadow, so have no reason to fear. Spring arrives early, they say. But in Manitoba on this sunny morning, our puppet procrastinator, I was going to say procrastinator, saw his shadow predicting 6 more weeks of winter. Oak Hammock Marsh this morning tells CBC's Shanley Vidal Manitoba Merv has the best accuracy rate of all the groundhogs at 73%. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Merv. Let's get into the forecast for today. Abby, one last time.
-3 in the city. Expect a mix of sun and cloud today. We're going for a high of +2 with brisk morning winds. Gimli, it's currently -4 degrees and clear, reaching a high of 4 degrees. Steinbach is at -3 degrees. Morris is at -3 degrees with that fog advisory, and you need to be careful on the highway.
Thank you, Abby. And I'll do a full thank you list in a moment. But first, Corey, anything urgent?
If foggy in western Manitoba, look out for that. Helen just called. There was a collision at Moray and Ness. Eastbound Ness, there's just a median lane that's open, so stay left. Westbound Ness, both lanes are closed, but you can kind of squeeze around in the curb lane, so look out for that. That's at Moray and Ness, that collision. Thanks so much, and I'll be back on Monday to take more calls.
All right, thank you to our live team. Thank you to our news department live this morning, Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, Aaron Broman out there today. Our associate producers in our CA unit, our current affairs unit, Wendy Parker, Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi, Chloe Friesen, Dylan Longhurst, Bruce Layden, Daniel Friesen, May McKillop, Jim Agapito, Issa Kixon, Chidi Akuma, Kalkadan Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders. Our community reporter, Shanley Vidal, out and about shivering for us today. Thanks, Shanley. Travis Peterson is behind the YouTube controls. Our producers in unit, Nellie Gonzalez, the show producer overall, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio. We are not here without you listening and watching and engaging, and thanks a lot. There was tons of that today. I had a lot of fun and learned a lot. So continuing through the day, ongoing coverage of lots of the stories that we started talking about this morning. So stay with us on CBC for Radio Noon and Up to Speed for more local programming. Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you again next week. The Current's coming up next.